Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be. For all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth, welcome to Vestiges After Dark. And I am your host, Bishop Bryan Ouellette, coming to you live from the deep woods of western Georgia on this October 17th, 2023. Tonight we have returning guests, Mikal VanOene, my good friend and student. Been a student for the entire time we've been doing the Forbidden Truth webinar, which is all about archetypal communication. And that's the subject tonight, and she's going to take you through it, specifically as it pertains to the use of the archetypes found within the tarot. But we're not limited to just the tarot tonight. We'll be talking about everything pertaining to archetypes and how they communicate with us. You don't want to miss it. Don't go anywhere. Everyone, welcome to a brand new edition of Vestiges After Dark. It's going to be an interesting Tuesday evening, I can tell you that right now. Maybe it's afternoon or morning for you as well. I know it is for many of you who listen all out there across the world. So we're very grateful for each and every one of you. Just a reminder to, if you do watch on YouTube, to find that little subscribe button and click it, and also the like button as well. That helps the channel out. And it also lets us know that, airing on YouTube's the right thing to do because we are a podcast. It's really designed to be an audio only kind of show. It's just so many of you over the years requested that there be a video component. And then, well, since we already uploaded all of the podcast episodes to YouTube every week, why not just stream it live like we do? So we simulcast it live in video through YouTube and on Spreaker live with the audio-only version. So preferably subscribe both places and like us both places. And we're also everywhere that podcasts can be found. Make sure you put in a good review. That really helps the channel and it helps the show out. Believe me, it's great to do. But we have liturgical libations with Jamie Wolfe. How you doing tonight, Jamie?
Good evening. Good evening, all.
What do we got tonight? I think we've had this one before.
We have had this one before. This is the Balvenie French Oak. It's a 16-year single malt Scotch whiskey, aged for 16 years in American oak, and then it's finished in a French, I try to pronounce this right this time, Pinot de Charentes.
Go ahead. It's so
we've
so
done
small. I'll
we've
worry
done. Yeah,
about
I'm having trouble with glasses because we're kind of dark. We like it dark down here.
Yeah.
But it starts out with a warm honey and vanilla before finishing with a note of energizing grapefruit, geranium, glazed fruit, and ginger.
It's Balvenie is one of those whiskeys.
Oh, I know why I picked it. We're about to kill it, y'all.
Well, I am trying to kill them. Yeah, it inspires me.
We got to make room in a stock.
It inspires me to open new ones. Actually, that should be in the decanter. I guess I missed that one. I didn't realize it was that low.
Still smells pretty good to me.
Well, it was open not too long ago.
Was this one I brought over?
Yeah, it's one of the ones you brought over. I think. Yeah.
Well, we're gonna kill it tonight.
Well, let's kill it.
Well, we're gonna try to.
Well, save some for Tracy. She'll help us.
It's just a splash for Tracy. Sorry, Tracy.
So Tracy, if you're listening, I think you are. You can come down and get yourself
Tip this
a dram.
bad boy up and finish her off.
Yeah, maybe do it at the next break. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's go ahead. This is always one of my favorites. Cheers.
Yep, that's good stuff.
That is a very good whiskey. You can't go wrong with it. Honestly, if I were to introduce somebody to Scotch for the first time, I'd probably start with Balvenie. I really would.
I do enjoy Balvenie.
Either that or Macallan. I really think that either one of those you can't go. Dalmore too. Dalmore's.
I love my Dalmores.
Okay.
Haven't had a bad one yet.
No, there really isn't one. The cigar malt is absolutely out of this world, and Total now has I think it's a 25-year-old.
We've got to make a pilgrimage.
Got to make a trip, to the Mecca of Scotch.
We don't have anything like the south side of Atlanta.
Joining us from Australia, we have Father Chris Yates. How you doing tonight, Father?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I'll meet you there in Scotland, because if you go around the distilleries with me, then they'll all love you because I'm English, so they'll hate me. So that's a kind of.
I'll pour on the charm for both of y'all, and we'll have a good time.
How's your Scottish
you'll
accent?
Be the acceptable foreigners.
Can you pull off a Scottish accent? Maybe, I don't know. You don't have the Scottish look. That's
I wouldn't even try. No.
You look English.
You look distinctively English.
I can do it.
You know, if you grew your hair down long and everything, you'd look like one of those, the stereotypical British king. I mean, you really, from the Middle Ages.
I'm a Celt.
Yeah, well, see, there you go.
I am a Celt. Yeah. I'm from the north of England, so I've got far more in common with Scots than I have with Anglo-Saxons. But we kind of, for the Scots, they make a religion out of hating the English, but the English, we don't hate the Scots.
Well, of course not.
So
you guys won, so
they're no threat.
I mean, there's a little bit of animosity still there. Yeah.
I have to say, I'm going to be very un-English now and say that Scotland is one of the most beautiful countries in the world. I mean, I absolutely adore Scotland.
It is gorgeous.
My friend's been there a couple times.
Well, those of you on the Nicolay Network know that I've been playing this wonderful historical game. I like historical strategy games. Grand strategy games are my favorite thing to do. Yeah. It relaxes me. I play every night for about 2 or 3 hours. It puts me into a perfect state to fall asleep, and honestly, it's the best cure for insomnia I've ever had, and it really is just wonderful. I need that kind of gentle stimulation at night to fall asleep. But anyway, I've been playing this game. It's called Europa Universalis 4. It's actually got several versions. There's one that precedes it called Crusader Kings 3, which is actually a newer game than the Europa one, but it deals with the different time periods. So Crusader Kings 3 starts in the 800s and ends around the 1400s. So it's the true medieval period. And then Europa Universalis starts in the 1400s and then ends right in the pre-industrial age, like the about a quarter through the 1800s. So I like both periods, but Europa's Universalis I've been playing. I finished my campaign. I was the King of France, and I finished my campaign. I did very well, actually. And now I'm finishing up my medieval campaign as the Francian Empire. So it's fun. I've reestablished the Holy Roman Empire and I'm ruling it as the emperor. It's a lot of fun. But when I finish with this campaign, go back to Europa Universalis, my next campaign is going to be as Scotland, and I'm going to see if the Jacobites can win this time. So that's what we're going to try to do.
Person coming excluded. Go Jacobites.
The Jacobites. We're going to see if they can win. Yeah.
Mock me.
That'll be the Jacobites.
The Jacobites. We'll see if they
will. Going back to your Balvenie, I always think that in the it gets taken over very quickly by vanilla. But I think the first
no, you're right.
Taste on the tongue is. I think the first taste is heather.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is heather.
I definitely agree with the vanilla.
But it is very strong vanilla.
Oh, yeah, the vanilla takes over the back of the tongue, basically.
Absolutely agree.
I
never thought about
vanilla,
heather.
You won't like it, that's for sure. But no, I can taste the heather. I can, yeah.
Now to mention it.
It's got that nice.
And that's not a bad thing.
So anyway, if you want to find out if the Jacobites win, that's coming. Stay tuned.
Outlander got me. Outlander got me rooting for them, except for that one guy.
I might put Father Chris Yates in as the King of England during the. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. You can actually add in characters.
The most unlikely thing ever.
We'll see how it
goes. You might do a good job. You never know.
You never know, right? You never know. You can create a character. Yeah. We'll see how.
I have to deal with all those angles. I think I'd turn into a tyrant and destroy my own people.
Well, I did. I got a little tyrannical with the Protestants when I was trying to keep France I was very successful as the French king, because not only did I, despite the Reformation hitting France very hard, because it's bordering on Germany there, right. So it's like you're constantly getting the influx. I was able to maintain the Catholicity of France, and on top of it all, we never had the French Revolution.
Oh,
I was able to keep the people so unified that they were content with my divine right rule.
You just kept the wine flowing. That's all that it was.
I did that. Yeah,
we kept them drunk.
Yeah,
like sure, whatever.
Well, that is what destroyed France. It was the revolution.
Well, yeah, I'm telling you, there are lots of revolutions all over, but they and so the interesting thing is the revolution in my campaign, because that's the fun thing about this, is that it starts you with the actual history, but as you make changes and as you make different administrative decisions or invade different countries as the ruler of whatever country you are, and you can be any country in the world in this game. You can even be the Iroquois. You can be you can be an Indian tribe. I mean, if you want, you can do all sorts of different. I mean, anything that was in existence at that time, you can be. But the interesting thing is that because France was so strong against both the Reformation and the revolutionary mentality of the time, the revolution went to England, and England had their own revolution instead. It was really very funny. So England kind of became what France was in real life, and then they went very, very. They went very heavy on Parliament and getting rid of anything that had anything to do with any kind of royalty. So they became very American in this campaign. It was very funny. But that's what makes the game so much fun, is that you can kind of play with different possibilities with history. And if you're a history fanatic, and if this is the kind of periods that you have history that you like, then it's a fun game to play.
I do love military history, so it might be fun to play.
Oh, it is. It's lots of fun. It's lots of fun. But I have all the expansion packs. So I would say if you want this game, wait till summer. It's half price usually in the summer, and you can buy them all. Because even if you buy the base game and then all the expansions, it's like $600, but you can get it down to almost $250 in the summertime.
That would be a deal worth.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's the way I look at it. It's like, this gives me hours and hours and hours and hours of stimulation. Mental stimulation.
I think I'd never leave the house if I got that.
Well, I mean, sometimes it's hard. That's why I play at night. That's why I play right before I go to bed, because it's like normally I would be either reading a book or watching TV. I do this, I do this.
Definitely have to get better internet in the sticks where I'm at.
Yeah. Well, you don't even need internet for this. I mean, just base internet would let you play it. Okay. You could download it here though if you're having trouble downloading it. But just bring your computer over here. Okay. So tonight. Before we get started with questions from the ether, I want to introduce you to something that we've been working on. So, we have our guest on the next hour, Mikal VanOene, and she's been on before. We talked about indigo children. We've talked about different things. I think this is her third appearance on the show, and tonight she wants to talk about archetypes, and that is the focus of my webinar. I've been conducting this webinar for 6 years now. It's an open webinar. Anybody can open enroll. You can enroll at any time. Everything that we've ever covered is archived. So if you come in late, you can go back and you got 6 years worth of content that you can watch. We've covered a variety of esoteric subjects matter. But the main theme, I guess you could say the story arc to this class that I conduct every Saturday afternoon at 1 p.m. Eastern time, is archetypal communication. That's what it all comes down to. When you look at the Western mystery tradition, when you look at the Eastern mystery tradition, when you look at occultism, and you look at esotericism and metaphysics and theosophy and, every religion, at least in the mystical side of it, it all comes back to archetypal communication, which is the foundation to the two primary schools of occultism, which is magic and divination. And so true divination isn't fortune telling. I hate to break it to people, just like kind of we've been busting a lot of bubbles this season, talking about that some of these after death experiences are probably not what we think they are, and even dying's not what we think it is. Even heaven's not what we think it is. And I know that this is kind of shattering some illusions out there. And it probably is affecting numbers because, it is what it is.
A lot of people aren't ready to hear anything outside of their paradigm that was shoved down their throat as children.
Exactly.
It's graduating from elementary school, right?
Right.
That's what it is.
It's time to mature.
I think that's what it is. It's like the world likes to keep you forever in elementary school, or in worse, kindergarten. And we're trying to give you a postgraduate experience here. So that's quite a jump, quite a leap for a lot of people not ready for it. And that's okay if you're not ready for it. It doesn't really help the church much if you're not ready for it, but it is what it is. Like I said, anyway, we spent the last 2 years, we're now working on astrology. That's the current unit. But before we were working on building our own archetypal oracle to work with as a companion volume to the tarot. So this was never designed to be a replacement for the tarot, although it can be used as its own system if you want it to be. This is actually something that was an idea that came to me back when Michael was a child. I remember we were at some event, and she and I slipped away to cut out these little index cards or something, and we made maybe 10 or 15 different archetypes on them, and we shuffled them up to see if we could actually do a divination session with these little index card drawings that we had created. And this became the foundation to what I'm about to show you. So this is the only one of its kind right now. This is a prototype deck that was just recently published. And two of my students, Joy Keeling, who you know from this show, and Tiffany, I think she's been in the chat room a few times, helped to put the booklet together, which is basically an outline of the content that we had in the class for the last 2 years. And it's a wonderful full color manual that helps you through understanding these archetypes that are in here you go, that are in this. So there's let me see, there's 57, 58, 59, 60 cards.
And you can appreciate the artwork and the way it's made. It's not, something you get that's real cheap. The cards slide real easy. You've got a nice glossy finish.
It's very professional. I mean, you won't be able to tell this from a deck that you'd buy from a major publisher. It's that well created. It's not cheap, but it's that well created. Now, I haven't decided. We're still kind of working out the specifics of whether or not we're ever going to make it available to the general public, but I'm showing it to you now because it's relevant to today's subject matter, and it might be, if you show interest, if the public shows interest in this, I will make it available to the public. But essentially how this started was, and I'll talk a little bit about it next hour with Michael, because I'll see if she remembers that little event. But we started with those archetypes, and then it grew into what this became. And then I took my students through, and together as a class we built these archetypes. And one of the things that we did to use this, and I know that this is going to get a lot of people all riled up, okay, particularly right now with the writer's strike and everything, and all of the criticisms that artists have towards AI, but this is an partially AI generated deck. And what I mean by partially is, what I did is I fed the AI a very detailed description of the archetype as I taught it. And then I had it generate 10 images based upon that prompt. And then I showed each of those 10 images after teaching the class on each archetype. I showed each of those 10 images to the students. And then every student would vote on the one that they felt represented the archetype the best to their understanding. And then what we did is we took every one that that was voted for, and we merged them. I used a program to sort of manipulate the images into a new image by merging the concepts. And what this did is it created an archetypal experience, because we're finding that AI can actually work with synchronicity in exactly the same way that any kind of randomized process can, in terms of shuffling cards or drawing lots or doing anything with divination. You can actually use a computer in the same exact way, so when you gave it these prompts, they were really speaking to the archetype in a very unique way, and having the students vote gave life to the whole process. Now, I did, to be fair to all those that criticize AI art and all this and taking away jobs from artists, I did make it available to artists if anybody wanted to grab it. There was a lot of people that said, "Oh, I'll do it with you," and they signed up, and I never got one example. So the reason that this has taken more than 25 years to finish is because I could never get an artist to actually work on it. I am an artist to a certain extent. I don't really do much with it that much anymore. But I was working on it, and it just became too time consuming that I wasn't able to keep up with it either. So being able to use AI to get these images done quickly was a fantastic benefit. And on top of it, being able to work with the synchronicity of the computer made it very interesting. And
the further we went in, the more
relevant,
accurate and relevant the images started to become. Like like it was learning what we were asking for. It was really neat to see over a 2-year period.
It is. So this is based completely upon my system, the esoteric mysticism model, okay, which I talk a lot about on this show that you probably don't even realize that's where it comes from. I wrote a book several years ago that was just never published because no publisher would touch it. And everyone's like, "Well, why don't you self-publish it?" Well, maybe I will, but even that requires a lot of I don't want some terribly produced book that has all typos in it and a manner of grammatical errors or something else. That I want it to be a good experience to read. I think it is, honestly. I think I've reread it a few times, and I don't see my own mistakes, so that's part of the problem. But maybe I could sell this in addition to the book and self-publish both. It's possible, but if there's interest for this, let me know, and we will actually make it available. Right now, I'm making it available to just my students because they're the ones doing the work, that did the work with me on it. But anyway, it's a very interesting thing. We'll talk a little bit about later. And then next season, which will start up, I think, the day before Valentine's Day. I think season 9 starts on February 13th, right before, because Valentine's Day is actually Ash Wednesday this year.
I was about to say, or they correspond.
So we usually start Vestiges right before Lent. So that will probably be when we start up again. And I will probably do the first episode with readings, archetypal readings from this deck, so you can kind of see it in action. We're not going to do that tonight because this deck's not ready. There is one issue. There's a format issue. I don't know if you guys can see it, but there's a format issue with a few cards. Didn't look like this when we put it in, but you can probably see it right here. Some of the words got cut off, like the letters on each side got cut off. I had to make the word a little bit smaller to fit it into the format system that the publisher required. So this was why I did a prototype deck, just to make sure that it looked good and make sure the art was, clear and everything was up on up. And so I made those changes, and so the next edition will be available, but I'll make it available to the entire public if there's interest. And like I said, you can see the deck in action next season. Okay, we don't have any open shows this season to do it, but we can do it in February. Okay. Anyway, I just want to put that out there. It's not really a promotion. It's really just to kind of understand a little bit of what I call marketing reconnaissance, to see if there's enough interest to actually spend time doing this. Because I did this for my students. I did this for the class. I didn't really do it for the world. But if there is interest in it, well, I'll make it available to everyone. All right, so let's get started tonight with Brandon Milum from Tennessee. How you doing, Brandon?
Doing pretty. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, you sound great. Like ever since whatever you guys did, you and Father Chris, it sound you like
Yeah, he
sound
sounds
fantastic.
good. I am getting a message in the chat that we're not full screen for some reason.
Not full screen.
A couple people have said that we are not full screen.
On the live show, you're still.
Yeah, we're still shrunk.
Oh, are we really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Sorry,
you're right.
You have the Zoom view on the live screen.
Yeah, I pushed that button, but it for some reason didn't go through, and I didn't notice it. Thank you. All right, should be good now. Thank you for that. All right. So anyway, this is the problem with engineering a show and hosting it at the same time.
Yeah.
You don't always catch everything. But anyway, let's get to questions from the ether tonight, Brandon.
All right, so first, I want to show my libations for tonight.
Oh, okay.
What's your libation?
What kind of caffeine we got?
23 authentic blend of natural flavors.
Oh, vintage.
The doctor.
It's vintage
Dr.
23.
Pepper.
I mean,
that's not
like
Mr. Pibb. No, that's Dr. Pepper.
In a wine glass.
Oh,
Okay.
There you go. All right.
I might as well spice it up a little bit.
Well,
Should have chilled it first, man.
It's actually a water goblet, but that works though for soda.
Okay, I just found it and like, hey, that looks like one, so I'll just use it.
It has a little bit of a stem there. It's a small stem, but I mean, go ahead, go for it.
All right, let's see here.
Just an over pour. You got to remember the fizz.
It's actually hard to get Dr. Pepper in Australia, believe it or not.
Really?
I believe it.
Man.
In England, it's just like America. It's in vending machines. It's everywhere. But here, you have to go to a shop that supplies, quote, British lollies.
Man, I don't drink Dr. Pepper.
Yeah.
I don't drink sodas anymore.
Drink soda.
But that was one of my favorites when I was on the
I will occasionally
carbonated bandwagon.
I will occasionally have a rum and Coke when I'm traveling. Because I find like
I only drink Diet Coke. That's like, I know that's tragic, but I just don't like sugar.
I don't care much for sugary drinks either.
Yeah, I've gotten away from.
I'm kind of like if I'm gonna have sugar, I'm gonna save it for like a really good chocolate mousse or something
really nice.
Yeah, something that's like worth the
make it worth it.
Worth the empty calories. Let's put it that way.
So remind me.
I prefer my sugar fermented.
Remind me never what there, Brandon?
Remind me to never come visit you unless I bring my own with me.
You won't find soda in this house.
Just remember, pinky's out, man. Pinky's out.
But there's plenty. There's a very nice wine collection. There's a very good whiskey collection. And the tequila's actually kind of growing.
I can vouch for that.
You can vouch for it. That's right. Yeah, you haven't even seen the wine
collection too.
I have an excellent cigar collection.
That's true.
Yeah, there's even some Cubans in there. I have the contraband, and I'm not afraid to admit it.
Very good.
All right, Brandon, let's get started with our first question from the ether.
So the first question comes from Danielle. Under one of the roots of the tree of Yggdrasil, the Vikings knew of a place called Helheim, where the dishonorable dead resided. Could it be that the idea of a physical place below us, rather than a condition, ended up in the modern culture's idea of what hell is?
All intertwined.
Yeah, well, it's the whole underworld mythos is a universal human experience. Every culture has some variation of the underworld. Every single one. No question about that. And they're very similar. I mean, I know we had your friend, I'm sorry, I'm so bad with names. Your friend who started us off, JJ, thank you. We had JJ on, and I know that he disagrees that the Shinto Yomi is the same concept as like Sheol or Hades, but I hate to say it, and I mean, I disagree with him. I disagree.
That's okay.
I really
in
do.
In this field, people are going to disagree.
Yeah, I do think they are basically cultural retellings of the same concept, because I think these concepts are pervasive archetypal experiences that are built within our DNA in exactly the same way that Carl Jung said it was. The collective unconscious is a real thing. Okay, it's a real thing. I've experienced it. I've seen it in action. I work with it every single day. So, yeah, I mean, of course, it's going to be flavored by the cultural paradigm. So that's why you're going to have things that seem different. But I don't see it as appropriation or anything to say that, or imprinting that, we're projecting our values on another culture by saying
it's a blending. It's a natural blending.
Well, I think it shows that we're actually a whole lot more similar than we're different.
Right. Exactly.
But yes,
well, it's like the metaphysical version of convergent evolution, isn't it? So in Britain we have deer. In Australia, they have kangaroos, but that's convergent evolution, right? They're basically the same principle, and you get the same with on the same theme. So a very developed language of the underworld, the land of Tír na nÓg in Irish mythology, and within Scottish, think about that folk song. You take the high road, I'll take the low road.
Right.
That's about death, right?
Yeah.
And then in Maori culture in New Zealand, you have almost exactly the same principle. There's I think it's kind of connected to ideas of the water cycle, that you die, you go into the earth, but then you go up to the clouds,
Yeah.
And so these things are common, and the commonality of that expression or that philosophy, it can't be ignored.
It can't be.
And clearly, as people who believe that we have a common creator, it shouldn't surprise us. It's written into who we are, that we would have these images within us.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's built into the creative faculty. And because there is no, I think you could say, there's no tangible physicality to these realities. They're purely ineffable spiritual experiences. There's not going to be the kind of consistency that you would see with a concept that is tangible. So therefore, every culture is going to interpret that ineffable experience according to their own sensibilities, which is why you're going to have those variations that make it look different, but it's really not that different. So that's why Sheol and Hades are identical. They're identical. It's basically like synonyms practically. When you look at, Norse mythology, and even going into the Americas, and you see some of the concepts there, the underworld journey is part of the human experience. And yes, we do get our concepts of hell in the Judeo-Christian theological sense from that archetype. That's where it comes from. No question about it. Yeah, of course. There's the idea of the damned and a place where the damned go is in every culture. In every culture. It's just how you get there and why you go there is going to be where the differences are, because there's going to be, of course, interpretive differences in the construct of the model, but the idea is there because it does exist. And see, that's what proves it exists. We talk about existence. Last several shows, the major theme has been what is real and how do we define what is real. And what I gave you is my definition, and the definition I teach my students, and that what is real is what endures, what lasts forever. And these archetypes last forever, which is why I say to everyone's shocked when I say, well, the archetypes are more real than you are, because they'll be here long after you're gone. They'll always be here. You will not be. So they have a semblance of permanence to their existence. We do not. We are a construct of them, actually. We're combinations of these archetypes built into, and they're always changing, always in flux. The person you are today is, I guarantee you, not the person you were 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and not the person you're going to be 20, 30, 40 years from now. We're always in flux, but the archetypes are always the same.
Well, and that's more than spiritual, because by biological scientific understanding, every cell in your body has been replaced within 7 years.
Right.
Yes.
So you're literally not the same.
You're literally
person.
not the same person. Except for neurons. Neurons do stay the same, but
sure.
Every other cell is replaced. Yeah, absolutely.
But I was just going to say that's why, because there are of course organizations, to use the broadest term possible, that really fight against those archetypes. I know we're going to talk about this, so I'm not going to get into the archetypes. I'm going to leave that to our lovely
It's
guest.
funny how somehow the questions from the ether always seem to relate to the subject matter.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but what I was just going to say was that that's why, you know, I don't want to pick on Islam unduly, but the idea of this being a whole text written, you know, a whole text written by one person, which is often cited as the great defense of Islam by Muslims, to say, oh, look, ours is the only one that's entire and complete. But if you look at that's actually why I doubt it. Yeah. Because I think, actually, no, I'd much rather have a Bible that's created over thousands of years of common and shared experiences interacting with these archetypes, actually. But that's why very organized, it's almost cultic, very organized religious people. I mean, there's something in common with certain branches of evangelical Christianity as well.
Oh yeah,
where it really tries to tie it in to this very narrow, I would say tyrannical, because basically it's in within basically the pages of a book. I think the nature of it mismatches life.
The nature of it, Father, being also, I mean, completely tied to the idea of theocracy, proves it's tyrannical.
Yeah. Well, because it has to be.
Yeah.
Because if you're gonna ignore the sort of I hate using words like this because they're so vague, but the organic experience of life. Mm-hmm. It's why evangelical Christians are very, very cautious, is at best, hostile at worst to
rigid.
Ritual, because ritual is in fact a kind of an expression and in our case within Christianity, of those things which are beyond words.
Yes,
and so that's why they're feared, right? Or rejected, because it doesn't fit into a paradigm of a very textual way of being.
That's why the Sufis are persecuted by other Muslims, because they don't see it they see it the way that you just described. They see it as an open experience, not a
that's
definitive
why I think in fairness to the Muslims that reject, I think they're right to say that Sufis are not Muslims. I actually think that's right, because I think what has become Islam is not what the Sufis do.
I think you're right. Yeah. And all the power to him, right?
Right.
So anyway, Brandon, that's the answer to the question. It's related to that, but I wouldn't say we just got it from Norse mythology. It's built into our DNA. The idea of the underworld and the heroes' triumph over the underworld. It's even written into Jesus' own story. Where does he go first?
Yeah.
Where's the harrowing of hell? I mean, that's the first thing he does he triumphs in the underworld. I mean, that's part of the human experience, and you couldn't be an incarnate God and not go through the human experience. And he's of course going to do it in the most deliberate, most actualized way possible, which is going to be right to the letter of the archetype itself. And so it makes perfect sense to me.
Well, and in fact, he unifies the archetype and the real.
Yes.
Sorry, the real. I'm using words that are terrible words. the archetype and the physical are united in him.
Yes.
That's what's unique about the Christ event, right? And that's why. That's why it is distinctive, and why we can say no, Christianity is distinctive, because we believe these things have been embodied, and only in him, really, truly embodied.
Embodied, yeah. That's the answer.
So the second question, and it's very interesting, Father, that you brought up Islam, because the second question is about Islam. So I had done a little bit of looking into Islam. So pretty much it's a pretty lengthy question, but why is it that people who don't understand Islam claim that Christians and Muslims worship different gods, when Jesus is spoken about in both the Bible, the Quran, God, Saint Mary, the archangels, Michael, Gabriel? Why do they still believe that we worship different gods?
Well,
first.
You can take it, Father. I was just going to say it's a typical, I think, methodology of fundamentalists to be that one of the tactics is of refutation is to not only discount the value of the theology itself, but to actually go as far as to say, well, you don't even worship the same God that we do. So don't even try to, to act as though you do. It's just another, I think, hostile attempt. And I get it. I understand where it comes from, because the way Allah is described in Islam does not reflect how we understand the Father in Christianity. They're not the same kind of interpretation whatsoever. But that's the issue, isn't it? That, if you look at the Old Testament God and the God of Judaism, you'd say it's different too. The Gnostics certainly thought so. That's what made some of the foundations of Gnosticism what they was saying, this can't be the same God, because but it was the interpretations. Yeah, it's the interpretations that create this illusion. Doesn't mean the God's any different. I would say the Great Spirit in Native American theology is still God.
Same guy.
It's just, but they're not going to have. It's not going to be the same kind of interpretation for them that it is for us. And but anyway, Father, what were you going to say? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, I was just going to say that what I would say to either fundamentalist Christians or Muslims who often make this claim is, how many gods do you believe there are? Mm-hmm. Because both would say there's only one God. So they can't be worshipping some alternative God. I mean, I think what they're both really saying is you're placing your worship at something that's not God. I think to give the devil his due, I think that's probably what they really mean. It's very, very careless talk to talk about worshipping a different God, because that suggests that there can be more than one God, and neither believe that, and I don't believe that. In terms of this is often Muslims do this a lot. They talk about, we love Jesus too, and they've got more about Mary in the Quran than there is in the Holy Scriptures. The first thing I'd say is I don't believe the Quran is Holy Scripture. So because I'm not a Muslim, right? And I'm not eschewing the fact that they believe it is. So therefore, whatever's written about Jesus and Mary in the Quran is not divine truth. Or it's certainly not divine truth that we would place authority on. No,
I would put it in the same category as the pseudepigrapha or any extra canonical, texts of the time.
Yeah, and then actually not sure in the comments has nailed it. The other thing I was going to say is that, they talk about Jesus, but they don't believe that he's God incarnate. So,
right.
So,
prophet,
I mean, actually, they're right to say we worship a different God, because if they're not worshiping the incarnate God, I mean, there is no alternative God. But
say it's a false God is how they would say it. I think, yeah, it's a false.
But going back
God.
to what you said about Judaism, I mean, the classical distinction. See, Christians do view Jews differently to Muslims, and the classic distinction is to say, Jews worship the true God. From a Christian, but this is from a Christian point of view. Jews worship the true God, but the way they worship him is imperfect. This is a very classical, Christian way of saying it. So they worship the true God, but they worship him through imperfect means.
Yes.
But Muslims do not worship the true God, and they worship through imperfect means. And of course, that Christians, most Christians worship the true God using the true means, which is to say the liturgy, the mass. And so that's why, by the way, I don't, and you might disagree with me, but I don't hold with Christians holding Seder meals during Lent. I think that's wrong, because our Passover is the Eucharist. And so I think it's wrong. I don't think people are putting their souls at risk doing it. I just think it's I actually think it's quite offensive to Jews too. I don't think it's a very good thing for Christians to do. It's good to learn about it and to understand these things, but not to participate in what we might consider an act of worship by doing it. Yeah. Because in fact, we believe that the perfect worship has been revealed through the Eucharist. And so they're the kind of category errors I think that people make.
If I could add another one, that I think there's a lot of misconception and misunderstanding that because they refer to God as Allah, that is proof positive that this is a different God because Christians don't call him up. But that's well, here's the issue. They'll say here in the South that, well, Christians don't call him Allah, so it's clearly a different God. It's like, but they do. They do. Arabic Christians use it because that's the Arabic word for God.
Right.
So you go to a Melkite church, you go to a Melkite Catholic church, they're going to say Allah. Mm-hmm. You know,
and if you go to a traditional Catholic church, we'll say Pater Omnipotens. That's just language. Yeah. It doesn't matter what language you say, but what matters is what we're believing about God. Yeah. And that's why in the Christian church, well, I know there are Christian groups that don't do this, but they should. In the Christian church, every Eucharistic act of worship, we ought to say the Nicene Creed, because that's the kind of statement of saying, when we're saying God, Deo, Allah, whatever language you want to say God in, this is what we mean.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, that's why the creed is there. It's not because we forget. It's because we're affirming to God, because what we say with our mouths matters. Mm-hmm. We're kind of making that devotional response to tell God we are worshiping you, or seeking to worship you in spirit and in truth, and truth is the creed. So
in the early church,
that's why we do it.
There was a division. Of course, there's always been divisions, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it wasn't just the Great Schism of 1054 that created division in the church. There's always been division from the very beginning. We even see some of that in the New Testament between Paul and Peter about various things. So, I mean, we know that exists, you know, but there was a stark difference. The first, I guess you could say, the first division in Christianity wasn't Catholics and Protestants or Orthodox and Protestants. It was Marcionites and Ebionites. And Ebionites really had this idea that you had to be Jewish. You know, that your Christianity was dependent upon your Jewishness. So conversion to Judaism was an essential step towards, you know, entering into this kind of relationship with God through the Christian worldview, where the Marcionites were very Paul focused and said that, no, all that needs to go. You know, and it became a very Hellenized kind of Christianity. It's kind of the Marcionites more or less won out in a lot of ways, but not to the full degree, because the Marcionites kind of excluded the Old Testament completely, saying that we don't need it anymore. And so anything that they didn't read Jewish scriptures, we do today. So there was, you know, the church found in its wisdom a middle road between these two extremes. But those were the first initial extremes or divisions in Christianity. It is my contention, without question, that Islam evolved out of the Ebionite influences in the Middle East. I am convinced that when they saw that of course it's speculative, we don't know, I don't have a time machine, I can't go back to find out if I'm right, but I would say that that when they found that they were not, when it was leaning more towards the Marcionites, you know, and was leaning more towards this idea that we're moving beyond the Jewishness, that, you know, you don't need to be circumcised anymore, you can start eating pork, all this stuff. They started going off. You know, that's what you did in the ancient world when you didn't agree, or when the larger society didn't agree with you, you disappeared and you went off on your own. I think they headed east, and I think that became Islam. Honestly, I really do. I think that's where Islam came from.
I agree with that. I think that's true too, and I know it's contended. Yeah. You know, not everyone agrees with that. Yeah. But I think again, the fact that there are references to Jesus, to Mary, to you know, it strikes me, and like I say, I know this is controversial, and I'm not speaking dogmatically on this. I just think that not that I'm capable of doing that anyway, but I do think that it began really as a Christian heresy. Mm-hmm. But going back to your first division, I mean, nobody talked about Christians distinct from Jews for, you know, 150, 200 years after the resurrection.
That's right.
The distinction becomes calcified eventually, because, you know, there've got to be some hard questions asked, you know, and those questions aren't asked whilst the early followers of Christ are in hiding and in small groups all over the place because they can't publicly discuss these things or debate. I mean, they just support each other from afar. Yeah. But of course, eventually when Constantine authorizes Christianity, makes it the state religion, that's when these debates are had. Yeah. And that's why a lot of these heresies, although they're condemned in the 4th century, 5th century, 6th century, they were contentious from the very start. Yes. And it's just that was the time when not least pockets of followers of Christ met each other. They'd never seen each other. They were in hiding, and then they go, "Oh gosh, you do that. Oh, this is your creed. Oh, I'm not sure that's right." And from that we get this great gift of the councils, which is the Nicene Creed, which really hasn't, well, other than what a naughty pope did in the 11th century, hasn't been messed with.
Which one? Which
naughty one?
I think they all were for at least a few hundred years. But anyway, to get back, I guess, to kind of solidify the answer to the question, Judaism, Christianity, Islam are all Abrahamic religions. They all trace their lineage back to Abraham as far as the origin point. Therefore, the God of Abraham is the God of these religions. The difference is, as Father Chris so perfectly put it, is the perfection or imperfection of the worship in the way we understand God, in the revelation, in the understanding of that revelation. And so for Christians, of course, they're going to see Judaism as a less perfect understanding of that revelation. We're going to see Islam as an incorrect or erroneous or heretical interpretation of that revelation. Islam says the opposite, Islam says the same thing, only they reverse it for themselves. They say that we're the ones who got it wrong, and they're going to correct it for us. But there's no disputing the fact that each one is arguing about the same God, without question. So it's a ludicrous thing, and it's just basically a vitriol is really why people would even argue that it's a different God. It's just to create dissension where there doesn't need to be any. I mean, there's certainly enough within the theology to argue about. You don't need to create illusions and fabrications to make the problem worse.
Well, and basically, the actual grown-ups in those religions, agree that they all worship the same God, that they're seeking to follow the same God. Yep. The Patriarch of Constantinople, the Pope, the Chief Rabbi of Jerusalem, the Grand Mufti, they all believe that.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Okay, what's our next question, our third one?
So our final question is from Adria. If perhaps someone of holy stature, recognizes that they are possessed, can one save themselves from being possessed?
Well, I would say yes, in theory, because all baptized Christians have been given full and complete authority over evil, over the devil, without question. We all, by virtue of being a baptized Christian, you now have full, complete authority over Satan in every conceivable way. The only thing that separates you from being successful is skill and actually understanding that authority that you've been given, which most people do not. So if a person has that skill, either naturally or through some kind of divine inspiration, or they also understand the gravity and the immense power of baptism, then yes, they could, in a lucid moment, be able to rid themselves of a demonic attachment, even as far gone as one that would lead to possession. It's just not likely to happen. And that's why I say to people all the time that I am not a magician. I am not Gandalf. I'm not Dumbledore. I don't come in as an exorcist and perform some incantation and remove it for you. Mm-hmm. I facilitate it with you. But what I do is I help you build the grace. You're actually the one that gets rid of it. We do is we reactivate the power of that baptism, which is why I can't perform baptism on I cannot perform exorcism on someone who was not baptized, because that's the initial grace.
That is the exorcism.
Exactly. And that is
the baptism.
Baptism is exorcism.
I've done the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody came to confession, in fact, and had presented with this issue, and I said, well, are you baptized? And the answer was no. And I said, well, first of all, the confession's not for people who aren't baptized. That's what baptism's for. And in fact, the one and the same is baptism, that you probably need an exorcism, and all baptisms involve an exorcism.
Yeah.
But I mean, going back to, obviously, ultimately, it's Christ that's delivering us, right?
Yeah.
And therefore, like you say, you're helping to strengthen that faith so that people can cry out to God with a sincere heart.
Right.
Now, if you look at some of the lives of the Desert Fathers, that they spend time in their cells, they have these temptations, they have some of them experiences of demonic possession, and I can't remember it's killing me that I can't remember who it was, because I should know. It's a really famous Desert Father who said basically he was possessed, and he made the sign of the cross, and the demon fled.
Yeah. I know who you're talking about. I can't remember the name. There
is an example of somebody doing just that.
That's exactly right.
But that's somebody who was a monk.
You're good with
it.
names.
Wasn't Origin, was it?
No, not Origin.
Okay.
Origin wasn't really a desert father. He was. He wasn't a.
That name just popped in my head.
Yeah. No, it's it's on the tip of my tongue too. Anyway. I'm so bad with names. Like, I couldn't even remember our guests from the first episode. It's like stuff like that. It just does not stay with me. But anyway, over the summer, it was the summer specials. But anyway, the names don't stick in my head. I'm sorry. So never, please, anyone out there, do not take offense if for some reason I can't remember your name. It does not mean that I don't value you or that you're not somebody important or special to me. It's just unless I'm constantly building interaction with you, the names don't stay in my head. They just don't.
I think you should remember Tracy's name. I think she could take.
That's probably important. For his health.
Or call an ambulance.
Yeah, that would be a problem. Yeah, then I'd have other problems. But no. But if it's somebody that if I don't interact with you on a regular basis, the names don't stick. It's just the way it is. It's not because I'm trying to be that way or being rude. So you can. It's just not likely to happen, because typically once you're under that kind of influence, the temptations are going to convince you typically that you're powerless, and it's going to use fear and doubt and despair to remove your connection to the power of baptism, which is Christ, of course. Christ
anger
is always
and
anger. Christ is always the exorcist.
Yeah.
Okay. He's always the exorcist. And we have a constant interconnection with him through baptism. That's what baptism does for us. That's why it's so vital, so important. That's why we say you have to get it done as soon as it's humanly possible. You cannot delay on this. If you want it, you need to go out there, get your ass off your couch and get it done, because there is no excuse for not having it done. All right. None. And it's too important to play games with. If you're playing games with it, if you're just delaying or I'll get it done later, then
But how many clients have we spoken? Well, I've spoken to, I know quite a few, and even the gentleman that I met a couple weeks ago during the move, wasn't baptized. Mm-hmm. He's wanting to be, but the answer I get a lot of times with clients who I'm like, "Are you baptized?" No. Do you want to be baptized? Yeah, I think I do. Okay, what are you waiting for? Yeah. Well, I just want to make sure it's the right thing to do. I'm like, dude, seriously?
Yeah.
We get it all the time.
Yeah.
They put it off and put it off.
It's I hate to say it, but it's that Protestant mentality that it's just some kind of like rite of passage, like a bar mitzvah or something. Right. I mean, it's like, no, it is your salvation. And the reason it's your salvation, okay, the reason that there can be no salvation outside of the reception of baptism is because there is nothing that connects you to Christ outside of that. Okay. Eucharist does not have any impact on you whatsoever without the power of baptism as its foundation. Okay. The grace does
the only
not
power
stay.
it can have is to damn you.
Well, that's it. That's the other side of it, is it becomes a curse. And we know that from scripture as well. You know, you eat and drink your own condemnation or something to that effect when it's done unworthily. And part of reception unworthily is not understanding what it is that you're actually doing. And if you don't have baptism, then you clearly don't get it. You clearly don't understand it. And if you don't understand why baptism is necessary, then you don't understand it. You cannot possibly eat and drink the Eucharist worthily if you don't understand those basic concepts. So it's not like the information's obscure. It's not like it's so far beyond you, you'll never get it. It's very available. It's very easy to find. We talk about it all the time. Just tune into my channel and believe me, in a mass or two, you're going to hear something about it.
It's just like the warriors of old. You can gain skill as a soldier and be handed your sword and go running off into battle, but without your shield, you're left open to attack, and you'll probably go down quicker than anybody else. So you need to have that protection on you before you go into battle. And so many people think they don't need it, or they're not sure, about getting it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we all have the power to yield over these over the demonic, but you need to have the skill. You to do that.
So that's,
right.
The bottom line, okay, the bottom line, if you remember nothing from tonight, remember these words, okay? The devil has no power that you yourself do not give him.
Absolutely.
We'll be right back after this. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone, to the second part of Vestiges After Dark. We are now getting ready to start with tonight's topic on archetypal communication with our very special returning guest, Mikal VanOene. So excited to have her back with us, and it's going to be a great talk. Don't go away. Okay, I wanted to show everybody this deck again because I did not realize that when I was showing it the first time, you couldn't see it. So this is the box, and this was actually designed. This box was designed by Joy Keeling, who's also one of my students. And so when you open up the box, the first thing on top is the booklet, which was a compilation of my student Tiffany's notes and Joy's organization, and she was the one that formatted it, and it's all in color, and it kind of describes all of the archetypes that you'll find in the deck. And so when you take this out, you can see all the cards. So there's 60 of them, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's 60.
Like I said, these are all generated through AI, but using very specific esoteric prompts, and then doing particular modifications based upon what the students felt were the most viable archetypes that were reflected. This deck contains every primary archetype that you're going to ever really deal with in the human experience. And so this is to be used mostly as a companion to the tarot. Mm-hmm. If you're into tarot, then this is something that you can do to help qualify your readings and bring clarity when sometimes the tarot might be a little bit too esoteric and too obscure to really understand. This is to help clarify it. But it can also be used on its own. If you want this to be your only oracle, it can be used in that same way as you would with runes or something. So I just wanted everybody to have an opportunity to see that up front, since I did not realize last time that the screen had been on the wrong setting. Even though I pushed the button, for some reason it didn't take, and that happens a lot, and I didn't notice it. Anyway, we are going to be talking right now with my student and my good friend, Mikal VanOene, to talk about archetypal communication. How you doing tonight, Mikal? Welcome back to the show.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine, yeah.
Well, thank you for having me back.
Oh, you've got an open invitation. You know that. So at least once a season, you know.
Sometimes I get a imposter syndrome on the camera like this.
I got you.
You guys touched on a lot of stuff I had been kind of reflecting on over the past few weeks. Uh-huh. One of them, Father Chris brought up interestingly, and it was the idea of convergent evolution. And this is something I can speak with some authority on because I studied zoology. I studied biology. That is probably one of the clearest ways I'd say that archetypes present themselves in a extra human, or like, I guess a sort of like in like a more natural setting.
In the natural world, yeah.
Yeah, and animals will even look almost exactly identical, but the fact that we can look at their DNA, we can trace it back to a common ancestor, some of them. We find that these animals are not at all related, and yet they still look the same.
Well, look at the development of a mammalian fetus. You can barely tell them apart from species to species.
Very similar. Very similar.
Start, yeah.
And
even humans have tails. We even start out with tails.
Right. Yep. So
you can't, in this country, you can't tell if you zoom in, you can't tell the difference between koala fingerprints and human fingerprints.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's bizarre. Interesting. Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, I know about that. It is very interesting. And so this idea that animals will evolve into niches, and look essentially the same, or at least have very similar traits that serve a similar purpose. And it's a very interesting thing that happens that isn't really explainable by science. Other than the fact that, they're fitting this niche because they're having these mutations, and the mutations kind of bottleneck them into like whatever's suitable for that environment.
Sure.
But I did write it. I have this little intro because my thoughts are so unorganized. So I'll read it. I wrote this.
That's because you're the other kind of Virgo.
Yeah. Yep.
Called out.
My students will know what that means. We just finished the Virgo
a few days
lesson.
ago.
Yeah, I'm the one that leaves everything everywhere and picks at the lint on my shirt. Okay, so
go ahead. Sorry.
I said it's okay. This is the intro I wrote, and it says, many countless people will discredit the tarot deck, as during the recent decades, its modern rise in popularity has coincided with a resurgent interest in New Age occult and pagan practices during the recent decades. One frequent argument I've encountered seeks to devalue the tarot as an oracle by reminding people that it is a man-made system. My counter-argument is that is precisely why it works. Who better to interpret and categorize the collective human experience than humans themselves? It is, however, important to maintain that the tarot does not seek to tell one's fortune. Due to the infinite nature of our ever-changing existence, fortune-telling is an unreliable art fraught with as many flaws as the people claiming to possess the ability to wield it. Therefore, it is equally as important that those of us who have sought to understand something as misunderstood as the archetypes presented by the tarot take on a degree of responsibility when helping others to understand it. Just as Jung and his contemporaries sought to shine a light on archetypal communication through dream work, self-interpretation, and self-reflection, and to outline a comprehensive archetypal system as it relates to the field of psychology, so too must we work at continuing to bridge the gap between scientific and spiritual schools of thought, which are currently at odds with one another in a world that views the two as mutually exclusive. And I say this could not be further from the truth. So there you go.
Yeah.
That
well
sort
said.
of sums
it up well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that gives us like...
So there's your thesis. There's your thesis
There's
statement.
my
that's the
thesis.
thesis
Yeah.
statement.
Now you got to defend it.
Right there.
Let's have the Viva.
Leave it to
By the
Father
way,
Chris.
I don't think you're wrong.
Leave it to Father Chris to make you feel like you're having to defend your dissertation for your PhD.
That was beautiful. Now let's debate.
Public speaking course in college, so
Sorry.
So,
just to make you feel good, I have a lot of sympathy with your statement.
thank you.
Let's talk about it. Let's start off with that, because clearly when people hear tarot, they're not thinking archetypal communication. They're not thinking Jungian archetypes or psychology. They're not thinking the human experience. They're thinking fortune telling. They're thinking Madam Catherine at the corner who's going to tell you that you're going to be rich someday, and look out around that corner because someone's going to get you, and don't take that trip tomorrow. That's what they're thinking tarot is. And that's, I think, just like astrology, most people think it's the horoscopes in the newspaper, not really understanding what astrology actually is. So it gets all thrown out. In fact, one of my students is they're looking to do, again, some marketing reconnaissance on this deck to see if there's enough interest out there to mass produce this for the public. And one of the things that we were talking about is, maybe you can go to your local new age stores, bookstores and whatnot, and see if there's any interest in it. Show it to them. Once you get your copy, you can show it to them. But one of my students said, well, I can't do it in my state because,
what the heck?
And she mentioned that apparently there's this, I'm not going to mention the person or the state, but there's a individual store that was doing psychic readings with tarot cards, and the law enforcement showed up and basically threatened that they would be in a great deal of trouble if they didn't either cease and desist giving readings or putting a notice that clearly states that it's for entertainment purposes only. Which I think is
somebody
that's
called
a civil matter. That's not a criminal matter.
Yeah, somebody narked them out and made the police come. It's an ordinance or something.
But
so you don't have to say which state it was, but I'm assuming it was in the South.
No, it's actually not in the South. Not the true South anyway. But no, it was in the South.
Midwest.
No, well, I mean, we only got so many that. Yeah, I'm telling you. It's up towards getting up closer towards the Northeast, believe it or not. But the problem I have with that statement is that it shows right from the get-go. Even, do you remember like the old in 1-900 numbers where you could call and talk to Miss Cleo?
Cleo.
This had to do also.
There's a documentary on her.
Yeah, well, she was a fraud
on Netflix.
She was a good fraud.
A documentary on her.
She was an actor, actually. I think she wasn't really a fraud. She was just an actor that they hired, I think.
She left all the way to the bank.
But I think she's dead now. Honestly,
yeah, she did pass away.
Yeah. But they had to also have, for entertainment purposes only on the fine print. And this is because this is the mentality that people have towards this thing, where it's always black and white. It's one or the other. It's either pure bullshit, and you better make sure that your people know it's bullshit by calling it entertainment, or you're a scammer. You're trying to, and honestly, with the people that get involved in fortune telling, okay, a lot of them are that. So
yeah, I mean, it doesn't help when you go to like the Ren Fair or to these festivals or to a tarot reader.
And they don't know what they're
the first
doing.
thing they have, the banner over their shop is fortune telling.
Yeah. It doesn't help.
Right.
So there's a distinctive difference between what the public perceives to be what is commonly known to be fortune telling and the actual esoteric art of divination. And even divination has a very, I think, distorted view in the world today. So, Michael, let's start off, I think, by kind of clarifying why it's not fortune telling. So let's start with that. I know that's a loaded question, but
oh boy, yeah.
I think you can kind of, from a springboard from what you just gave in your little thesis statement, and then who knows, you might end up with a PhD from Father Chris by the time it's all over. I mean,
if only I could grant them.
Rub it in my mom's face. I am a doctor.
If only I had one.
Well, you can just make your own school, Father. It doesn't matter if it's accredited.
Well, yeah, loaded question. So the way I see it is the world we live in, or the plane we live on, is that there's an infinite amount of possibilities. And people actually use a system similar to tarot, I'd say, without knowing, when they're making an informed decision. Like, for instance, like you say, oh, I'm dealing with this let's just give a random example, like at your job. If you're dealing with a difficult person at your job, you gain some information about the person. You've met people like the person in the past. And so using all of the data you've gathered throughout your life to inform you of what sort of person that is, you will then say you want to avoid a conflict with that person. You're going to act in a way that will avoid contact or a conflict with the difficult person at work. That's archetypal communication. And we do it every day. Mm-hmm. We speak in stories. That's just what humans do. And that's another thing that I'm very confident about, is being a storyteller, because I animate and draw and write.
You're kind of like an archetypal person. I mean, that is really so much of your I dare I say identity, because I mean, we all form one, we all have identity, even though I kind of teach trying to eliminate as much of that as possible, but there's still ego reality that has to be contended with. While you live on this planet, there's ego reality, and there's an identity that's associated with that. So, your identity, as far as your ego reality goes, is very archetypal in form, which makes you, I think, a very interesting person. It obviously lends itself towards those more artistic pursuits like music and, art. But it also gives you, I think, a deeper understanding, which is why you're exceptionally qualified. It's interesting because this is part of a 2-part series we're doing right now. This is part 1 of dealing with archetypal communication through the tarot, and you're hearing it from a musician and an artist, Mikal, and also a therapist too. I mean, you're kind of like, you do clinical,
a social worker,
work, yeah. Mm-hmm. So there's therapy involved in your work. So you're doing these 3 components, okay, very archetypal types of work. And next week we're gonna have James Ferreira, who's works in Hollywood and creates big movies, and he's going to be talking about his journey into the tarot through these same archetypes. And it's interesting because you're both very different kind of people, but you both are connecting to the archetypes through these storytelling roles. You know what I mean? Yes. And
I'm kind of straying a little bit. I want to say one more thing before I answer your question originally. Yeah. But I think we've brought this up in class, but actors are often troubled in the industry in Hollywood.
Oh, yeah. See it time and time again.
Yeah, funny enough, voice actors, not so much, which is very interesting. But like actors who will play in a film, a lot of them are troubled, and my theory is that it's because they can't separate themselves from the archetypes they're embodying in the films that they're playing.
And the better the actor, the more they're able to do that. I mean,
exactly.
Absorb the archetype.
The method actors especially have issues.
Yeah, because they will
absolutely dive into the
lives.
Role. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So many of them, I think, have a lot of psychological issues because of that. But anyway, to answer your original question, there's these infinite possibilities, and things sort of form a story based on how you perceive it, but also based on what others around you perceive. You're not in a bubble, obviously. Right. Sometimes I wish I was, but
but you can only create one. That's all you can do, is create a little one that you can escape to from time to time.
Yes. Yeah. So there are ways to interpret data in a sort of like a formulaic way. Quite literally, I would say a formula in mathematics, which is not my strong suit whatsoever. But I do know that there's equations. You plug numbers in. The numbers, you can have different numbers go through the same process. It's going to have a different result, but the process itself is the same. The equation is the same. So that's sort of the process of communicating with archetypes is we will each experience every archetype completely differently based on our own aggregate. And then the end result is going to look differently from one person to the other. So tarot kind of works to interpret how those archetypes are basically playing with you, and whether or not, do you want to engage? Do you want to play along? Or do you want to choose how to form another path? Or there's lots of different choices you could make, depending on what question you ask. So I think that it serves as a very important tool for people who do their own readings. But some gifted people can definitely do readings for other people. But I think it'll serve a person best if they learn to do it for themselves, because then it's the experience is wholly within themselves. So I don't know if I'm making sense.
No, that makes sense. I think the only thing I would add to that is that, so then some people might say, well, then why does it have this association with fortune telling? And I think it's because those patterns that we can choose from have certain predictable outcomes. To a certain extent, there's a certain predictability to those outcomes. In the same way that weather patterns can generate predictable outcomes, so that a skilled meteorologist can look at certain pressure systems and say, well, this is likely to create a hurricane, or likely to create a nice high pressure system, and you're going to have a nice sunny day. Or, low pressure coming into some cold weather. We're going to get snow. These things have a certain, if this happens, then that result is a very likely outcome. So a divination can be used to predict the future in the same way that a meteorologist predicts the weather. Okay, not flawlessly, only looking at the likely statistical outcomes of certain types of patterns. So basically it's pattern recognition and putting these patterns together in such a way that we can say, well, if A and B happen, then C is a likely result. And that's where the prognostication aspect of it comes from. The problem is it started getting lumped into just raw psychic ability, and psychic, not in the empathic sense, but more so in the, again, telling the future sense, which is problematic from the same standpoint that I have with mediums who come up on the street. And I think Danielle, one of our moderators and also a student, has, upsets her when these mediums will come out of the nowhere and say, I'm seeing this person behind you. His name is Kenneth. It's Kenneth, I think. Oh, it must be your father or something like that.
Something with a K.
That kind of stuff.
Is that cold reading? That's cold reading.
It is cold reading, and it's not ethical, in my opinion.
I say, didn't you have someone on the show like a couple years ago that referred to that as like a drive-by medium?
I think was it Patty Negri?
It might have been. That sounds like something she'd say.
Sounds like something she'd say. Drive-by medium. I think you're right. It might have been Patty Negri that said that. Because people that are genuinely in the work, okay, people like my colleagues on Ghost Adventures, Patty Negri, the Paranormals. They're dealing with this kind of shit and the repercussions of this kind of shit all the time, because they're doing this work and trying to legitimize it in a way that brings it back to kind of, where the people that are doing it the wrong way or doing it for the wrong reasons are giving a bad reputation. Same thing with Christianity. Let's face it. I am hated for being a priest, a Catholic priest, for so many different reasons, because people hate Christianity because they think all Catholics are pedophiles or something. A handful of people misuse or do horrible things, and then it just gets generalized to everyone. So if you're really sincerely doing the work, then you have to deal with all of the ramifications of all these people who are not. So yeah, it is like a drive-by. What was it? Drive-by
reading.
Drive-by medium, yeah. So that's where the prognostication aspect comes from, because what you're doing is you're predicting patterns. So these patterns, as Michael has indicated here, are built within your nature. We call that in esoteric mysticism, which is also comes from Buddhism, somewhat, not perfectly. It's just borrowed and some kind of concepts borrowed by from that model to kind of make sense of it. We call it the aggregate structure. And the aggregate structure is made up of essentially these empty aggregates that get filled with archetypal patterns that animate the structure. So in other words, this is the very substance that gives you life. You might say it is life itself. Life is the archetypes, and the reason that you can move through life and interact with life and be even aware is because you are animated by the archetypes. So one could say, in this sense, that the archetypes that are recognized in the tarot are literally the aspects of the soul. And there are people that have, you could say, commonalities, and people that have oppositions to those same commonalities. And if you meet a person that has similar aggregates to yourself, then you're going to instantly find rapport with them. You're not even going to possibly know why. But that's just the way the pattern works, because it's a like attracts like thing. And that similarity is instantly recognized on this deeper spiritual level. Likewise, you might meet someone for the first time and you have an instant repulsion towards that person. You can't stand them. And that revolting feeling that you feel is also the result of having incompatible archetypes. So these patterns can be separated through the process of what Carl Jung called synchronicity. And synchronicity responds or reveals itself through random events, that if there is meaning attached to a random event, then that random event can reveal the quality of time. And people might say, well, that's a bunch of bullshit. That's a bunch of pseudoscience nonsense. Is it? Because this is exactly what the double slit experiment in theoretical physics is showing you. The fact that when we have intention, if that intention is to observe, then it affects the external universe, to the point that waves can become particles and particles can become waves by virtue of whether or not you're intending to observe it. And that is actually the foundation to synchronicity. If there's ever going to be a researcher who can get into both metaphysics and theoretical physics at the same time, then they will eventually find the meaning of everything, if they stick with it. If there's a whole group that creates a field of study that deals with those two things together. The problem is right now there's too much duality. So there's science and philosophy, religion not wanting to work together. So Michael, I guess considering that in terms of these patterns of energy, and looking at them as actually the substance that our soul is made out of, and because one of the characteristics that comes out of this interaction is consciousness itself, is what fundamentally makes us self-aware, then would you say that the quality of these archetypes are awareness itself? So these are fully sentient beings, in a sense, almost like gods unto themselves, which might even lead to where pagan religions of the ancient world would have thought that there were all these gods, because they were interacting with all these spiritual forces that were more powerful than them, that had these different personalities and seemed to be like gods. Would you say that that's where it comes from?
Absolutely. And Hinduism as well.
Yeah, Hinduism, yeah.
The different facets of Brahma.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are basically reflections of God in a sense.
Yes.
So it's like a prism. You turn it one way and it's going to reflect a bunch of different colors. And I'd say having this sense that something bigger than us is being shoved into little ape.
I think
yeah, not so much.
I'm mindful, Michael, that I talk too much, and so I've been really deliberately trying not to jump in, but my brain goes all over the place, and so I hope I'm going to jump in with something helpful.
Sure.
I think because I like the like I say, I support the thesis, so I want to try and flesh it out a bit.
Okay.
I think that we two things are true at the same time and get misinterpreted by all people. That is, especially from a Christian point of view, but not uniquely Christian. We are all uniquely made, by God for his purposes. That we are all unique to Him and loved by Him individually. But so that's true. But the shadow side of that is that we can think that we're so special that no one's like us. And so, because the other thing that's true is human beings are a species. Even if we're going to be very metaphysical about it, embodied rational souls, we have commonality amongst us, and so humans, no matter how different culturally we've grown up, we've got far more in common with one another than we have with a fly, and then of course you abstract that once you get or concretize it, I should say, once you get a Republican and a Democrat in America think they're so different. Well, they wouldn't think they were so different if they were both put in Ulaanbaatar. Yes. They think they were far more alike. So, these things are all true, right? And so the purpose of archetypes is actually a reminder of our commonality, and it's why some people really react strongly against it, because they want to think they're so special. Their ego won't allow them to realize that. So that's one thing. And accompanied with that, I want to draw a parallel. And again, this is going to really annoy fundamentalist Christian types. What do they think the parables are?
Yeah.
What do they think the parables? Why is it that they say, "Oh, I've read this parable all my life, and every time it tells me something different"? Yeah.
That's the point.
It's not because you're special. Yeah. It's not because the Holy Spirit is going, "Oh, boom!" Here's it's because He's using archetypes.
Mm-hmm.
And so. There's absolutely nothing evil or wrong about archetypes. I think you're right. Where I get really sharp with tarot cards and other forms is nothing to do with their use as archetypes, and that's why I think one of the first things you said was it really is of most use to read them for yourself. That's exactly why, and I can see that the wise guidance for somebody that can help just discuss these archetypes. It's almost like art therapy, right? We're saying rather than talk about my, lie down on a couch and tell you about my relationship with my mother, we're talking about these cards, which is a slightly easier thing to do because there's a level of abstraction that allows that to
well, it's part that, but it's also like part Rorschach, part projection test. It's kind of like it gives you an opportunity to stimulate the mental process by looking at a provocative image that will either relate to what you're feeling or not relate. And that's ultimately a very psychological way to use it too.
Yeah. So in that regard, I've got no objection to it. So I'm really going to let you come in, but because and then I'll shut up because it's important. But that's where I think you see, nobody would accuse a psychiatrist of being a charlatan if they just said, "Oh, well, this often leads to X, Y, and Z," and basically they speak in archetypes as well, right? It's just that they can also write prescriptions for drugs, and so nobody would accuse them of being a charlatan. But it is why it is so bad when people do abuse those positions where someone's really laying out their soul on the line and using these archetypes that are common to all humanity for somebody to take advantage of that for profit. I think that's where there is a darkness. I think that's but the darkness is not in the cards, it's in the intention of what's being done with them.
Yes, I always say if you want a very good reading from someone, don't pay any more than $10. because
Like, I guess I'll go
or
ahead and
free.
I guess I'll add something just like a couple minutes. I think one of the main reasons why tarot cards and divination's given such a bad name is people that are doing it, people that make the most noise, are the ones that don't need to be involved in it at all. And it could go back to like the paranormal. Like there's a lot of people, even in my little tight area, the city I live in, that do it and make thousands of dollars off of it.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm compared
Absolutely.
to them.
Well,
So
they profit off of people's
There's
misery
people-
and their doubts and fears.
And vulnerability, yeah.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah.
So it's people
Yes.
that have no place in it that make the most noise and get the most recognition.
Unfortunately, it's true of most things.
and also, you know that somebody who's licensed as a therapist in some form or another actually has been taught something that they know what the
Right, and they put in the work, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. They read the books, they read the text, they put in the work.
and they know their limitations,
Did
right?
the practicals.
Yes, yep.
Yeah.
And no, unfortunately, there isn't a really a good system to earn any sort of like a accredited degree or whatever for reading tarot. So you have to make the discernment as a individual. And now I forgot
That
what I was
rare
going to
gift of
say.
the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. What? So I was going to say something based off of the point that you just made, but now it's left my mind.
Is it about the parables?
It'll
It
come
might have
back.
been about the parables. I think that fired something off in you.
It did. Okay. I don't think in words, so I have to kind of.
You think in archetypes?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Plug in, Michael. Plug in.
Well, that led to me, and the discussion about psychiatrists really. I worked with a therapist. I've done a lot of inner work for myself, so I do know there's a bunch of different methods, and there's something called parts work, which has been invaluable to me, along with learning archetypes in an esoteric way. But parts work is identifying parts of yourself that have become maladaptive. So a personal example would be I am a perfectionist to the point where I will obsess over one single line of a drawing that I'm doing.
Well, see, that's the Virgo coming out. That's the Virgo.
Yes.
Yeah, you're just not the organized kind of Virgo. It's the other kind of Virgo.
Yes. The little gnat on my desk is but everything else is cluttered.
Yeah.
So then I would go in and say, why is this no longer serving me? Well, first of all, where did this come from? Why did I develop this? And then, is it serving me, or is it a functional part of me? And you basically, there's lots of methods to do this, but you go in and you interact with that part, and you can imagine this in any way possible, any way that suits you. For me, it was I would draw comics. I would have these whole almost like meditations of going in, and the perfectionist was this kind of scary looking creature, this sort of, he had a very long snout, and he was sitting at a desk and drawing the same line and over and over and over again. So I drew out this comic of me going in and saying, look, like, I know a lot of bad stuff happened to us as a child, and you formed as a result of me not having any control over the awful things that have happened to me. And now you're there to protect me, and you've grown as I've grown, and now you're here to protect me, but you are drawing the same damn line over and over and over again. How is this protecting me? You're not, this isn't functional anymore. It was when we were kids, and now it's not. So sort of having this compassionate conversation with these parts. And this is an actual, this is used in psychology, in the field of psychology, for people who have like PTSD and other, what is that cluster? Is that cluster D? I forget.
Oh,
like
it's
anxiety,
been too long
depression.
for me. It's been too long for me. I don't compartmentalize anymore. I break people out of boxes, so that they don't mean it. That stuff doesn't mean anything.
I'm not American, so I don't use that language.
Yeah. Okay. Well, people who have issues stemming from their childhood, often at the center of all of these issues is a scared child, and we're all just scared children, and so we surround ourselves with these archetypes, and I remember what you talked about. You started talking about people who are so resistant to being put into categories. And it's so funny. I mean, we have become such an egotistical society, especially in the West, that it's actually, it makes me sick to go online, actually, like physically ill.
Yeah.
So I have to stay in my little corners, and but people are so resistant to being put into categories, and yet those same people are ready to take on labels and identities.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's this like push and tug and pull and push, and I don't think anybody really understands exactly what's going on at the root of all of this, and it's really sad to watch.
Well, that I think describes one of the most valuable uses for understanding what divination really is. So, let's get out of the fundamentalist mindset that this is like some tool of the devil, because it has some kind of association with the occult. If
it's a tool of the devil, it's a really rubbish tool.
It's because it's got that devil card in there. They can't handle anything that has that. Obviously, they're always going to bring us back to, these paradigms that Christians must obsess in. And Christians are more obsessed with, I always tell people, if Christians put half the energy into God that they do into the devil, they'd be okay.
Yeah,
They'd be okay, but they're so obsessive
Lord.
about the devil that I think God
this
just lost
is
in
where
there.
I know I'm from a different culture from you, because here, I mean, you struggle to find a Christian that believes in the devil outside America.
Yeah,
honestly.
see, it's the complete opposite here.
It's so different. I can't, in a way, I wish I had your problem.
Well, I think my problem might be more approachable. But then again,
at least they're agreeing on the subject matter.
That's true.
I mean, I can't tell you outside of America. It's just, the West outside of America, the European way of thinking, which is everywhere outside of it. They're so secular you can't even believe it.
Wow,
it's very materialist in its nature, and that's hard to overcome.
And it's the end result of a rampant liberalism, but that's another show.
Yeah.
I you mentioned something about the Republican and Democrat being similar, with if they were thrown in a different situation. And I often think the same about atheists and like evangelicals or dogmatic Christians, and like telling people what's right, what's wrong. They're the same people.
Mm-hmm.
They're both evangelists.
Yeah, they're both. Yeah, exactly. They're the same people. And
well, except it's not good news. So
right, exactly. Yeah.
It's bad news.
Yeah,
it's all bad.
It's bad news. Yeah, it's the bad news. The bad news is God hates you, and has murdered his own son to help you out. That's the one hand, and on the other hand, the bad news is nothing matters, and you might as well just be dead.
Yeah.
They're both bad news.
Yeah.
Very bad news. Very bad news.
Yeah, that's it's wild, and I that's one thing. It's like I'm so interested in just observing, but then at the same time it gets to me.
Yeah.
Very easily. Not because I feel offended in any way or too attached to one thing or the other. It's really, really sad. And I feel so much for people. And I wish so badly that I could just walk in the middle and just reflect people's show them what they're doing. I don't know how to describe it, but I really
throw it in their face.
You just brought up, though, the point why I teach this, because one of the criticisms I get, based upon everything we've talked about and how Christians are in this country in particular here, that there's a lot of, I don't do anything to help myself. Okay. I always talk about how I'm a terrible administrator. I'm a horrible fundraiser. I have no business being a bishop because a bishop needs to really do those things well to run a successful church. And I don't. I'm terrible at that. Add to that now the fact that I don't teach easy theology. So I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to sugarcoat things. I'm not going to hold your hand. I'm going to give you the hard realities of spirituality, and that's all you're going to get from me. I'm not going to force you to believe anything. I'm just going to tell it the way it is. That doesn't bring in a lot of support, and turns people off. So that hurts. The prospects for a ministry like this, but even more basic than that is that when people do their research on me and they find, oh, he teaches an occult webinar every week. He's been doing this for 6 years. Oh, he's got this show on YouTube where he talks about all sorts of these. This is no Christian bishop would do any of these things. So then that hurts us even more, because now that just keeps this thing being like, I must be some kind of false teacher, some false prophet, some cultist. There's all sorts of crazy stuff that people have made up about me.
I don't remember you claiming to be a prophet, so it's hard to be a false prophet.
I've been accused of being a false one.
Yeah.
I have, but really, and you might say, well, then if the church struggles financially because nobody wants to support it, except for this little handful of people that, do what they can, then why don't you make it more mainstream, just out of a business decision, out of a practical decision? You don't necessarily have to betray your values. Just don't do all these extra things. And it's like, but this is why I have to. This is why I have to. Right. Because I have a higher obligation than just making sure this church succeeds. Look, my concern is this, okay? I could build a church that just does what everybody else does and last forever, or at least last for as long as I'm around to run it. Or I could run a church that might not last for much longer, could close in a few years. Who knows? But I will have made a significant impact in the lives of the people that it did touch, where they were, for the first time probably in their entire existence, exposed to a raw, authentic truth that they never even knew was out there. Mm-hmm. And this is about that self-discovery. So when we start talking about, well, why do you teach tarot? Why have you studied tarot for over 30 years? Why would a bishop do this? And why would I still do this? And why do I still talk about this? And why am I making tarot decks with my students? Why am I doing this? Because it is...
Well, the answer is something like the reason we look at cave art from thousands of years ago. It's the same answer.
It is very much that. It is very much that. It is a journey into self-discovery so that we can get to that authenticity that we're connected to. Okay, to kind of get rid of the rubbish that sort of piles up. I look at us as this collection of intricate webbing that just sort of contaminates us, and then we start to get to a point where we can't see beyond the corruption. We can't see beyond the contamination, to the point that we start to believe we are the corruption and the contamination, which isn't exactly wrong because we created it. And all of the problems of this world are ultimately, in the end, our own doing. So there's truth to it. And that makes it even more difficult to explain, because, that's not exactly a wrong point of view. However, we are also connected to something greater, something higher, something more authentic. And that is a closer approximation to our true nature than anything else that we can connect to in the rest of the world. And tarot and in the instruments of the occult can do this if they're being used properly. Not for fortune telling, not to wow your friends with how much of a psychic ability you have, but to show authenticity where it is through the mechanics of synchronicity and everything else. We'll be right back after this.
I need love.
Welcome back, everyone, to the third and final hour of Vestiges After Dark. We've been having a very enlightening discussion so far with our special returning guest, Mikal VanOene, about archetypal communication. And as it pertains to the tarot, and yes, the tarot is not the evil thing you probably were taught it was, at least in the United States, according to Father Chris. We'll be taking your questions now. The number to call is 718-362-6380. That's 718-362-6380. Remember to enter PIN number 855-4111. That's 855-4111 to be placed into the queue. If you're international and would like to call free, you can call us on Skype. Just dial Eye of the Seer, EYEOFTHESEER, and we'll take you on the air. We'd love to hear from you, but we'll also be taking your questions from the chat room on YouTube. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back in just a moment. I am always amazed at the disparity between the audience numbers live on YouTube and the on-demand listens throughout the rest of the podcast universe. If some of you who are on-demand only listeners, podcast audio only listeners, please try to come in every now and then to a live show here on YouTube and interact with us. We'd like to get to know more of the audience. A lot of our YouTube audience is familiar faces or familiar names, at least from week to week, but we'd love to see the rest of who's out there. Like last week we had that wonderful call from Bryan.
Right, that was a great call.
Yeah, and it's like, there's all these people listening to this show, hundreds and hundreds, even thousands sometimes on demand, but we don't really see those numbers live. So try to, make some time on a Tuesday evening and come in live and watch on YouTube and call into the show. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd like to, interact with more of the extended audience, because most of our audience, I'd say more than 90% of our audience, is an on-demand audio-only listener from either iTunes or Spotify or iHeartRadio or someplace like that. So it'd be great to, see you on YouTube every now and then. Okay. So think it over, try to do it sometime. But anyway, we're taking your questions now. 718-362-6380 and PIN number 855-4111. International call on Skype, Eye of the Seer. It's completely free. We'd love to hear from you always. So I guess let's start with Jamie. What is our first question?
We have one from Not Sure, and I have to agree, I've been having some weird dreams lately too. He says, I'd love to hear more about the dreams Bishop has been having. Many people have been having interesting dreams lately.
Yeah, I'd say that I go through periods of time where I don't remember my dreams. They say that we're always dreaming. We just don't remember them unless you're waking up at exactly the right kind of time, where you're in that right kind of state of sleep where you're having a dream. But these past, I'd say the last 5 or 6 days straight, which is unusual for me these days. It wasn't when I was a kid. When I was younger, I dreamt constantly. I'd remember all sorts of dreams, sometimes several a night. Sometimes they'd wake me up in the middle of the night, and that's why I would remember so many of them, because I was constantly having these engaging dreams. But as I've gotten older, I think I sleep a little bit harder and I go longer past REM, so I don't wake up in the middle of the dream and I don't remember what I've been dreaming all night. But these past 5 days, I've been having very intense dreams, not in like a spiritual sense, not in a nightmare sense at all, just very vivid, very unusual dreams, things that involve people that I do not know, going to places that I've never been and doing things I've never done, which is kind of an interesting mix. And I kind of throw out these kinds of dreams as being merely defragmentation of the brain, because typically it'd be like a replaying or retelling of something that you are doing or people that you do know. But these are very foreign experiences, and strange, like walking through an abandoned. The first one that I recall from this was earlier in the week. I was walking through a very tiny. It was like a shopping mall, but it looked more like a dentist's office from the outside. You walk inside, and it was like this little tiny shopping mall with was just like L-shaped. A corridor with all these closed down stores on one side and all windows on the other side. And so I walked through and, looking at it, was still open with lights on and everything, but all the stores had vacated, as is a common theme, I guess, today. And malls aren't doing too well in our day and age of internet purchasing. So I went all the way to the end. And then when I turned around and came back, all the stores were open for business. And it was a thriving, bustling shopping plaza again. And I interacted with people that were there. Nobody was familiar what that meant. I don't think it means anything spiritual. It just was a very interesting kind of thing. But what was unusual, and this is where it started to go from just merely a strange dream to something perhaps more spiritual, is that as I was exiting the shopping center, there was a person that came up to me from one of the stores, and he said, "I think you need some cigars." And I said,
I think
okay,
you're right.
I think I did say that. I think you're right. And I said, do you have Cubans? And he says, of course I do. So, this was an interesting exchange because that's not something I'd ever say in this country. I know that they wouldn't have Cubans, but it was like here I felt like, okay, well, this is a place.
Are they still illegal?
They are.
Shh.
That's mad.
It is JFK. He closed it down.
I thought
and they
Obama had reversed it.
Well, what he reversed was the legality of being able to, as an American citizen to buy them in another country. That was illegal up until Obama. And then he opened it up where you could take them back.
How is that a law? Like, how can you enforce law in another country?
You can't enforce it, and no one's going to be there. But it was just to show the stupidity of legislation and how we pay all these tax dollars for people to come up with bullshit like this. Mm-hmm. But anyway, he allowed you to be able to take back. You could bring back a certain amount of boxes. You could do that, and then Trump got rid of it. And so now you can't bring them back anymore. I sometimes do, but
not a smoker,
you're not, but Trump got rid of that. So he reversed what Obama did. We're right back to where we were with JFK. And we've been in this stupid embargo for decades, and it hasn't changed a damn thing for Cuba. It just hurts the people.
I mean, when it was first put in, you could see.
You could maybe in the beginning, but the fact that this is still going on, it has not worked, and it only hurts the Cuban people. And I think it makes it harder for them to come out of their politics. I really do. I think that they're so oppressed now financially that they're stuck having to deal with this dictatorship. And I think that maybe if they had more financial normalcy, there'd be more inspiration by the government to become normalized. That's just my theory. But anyway, I know that's unpopular in this country to speak like that. Anyway, that's another story for another show. We have a lot of different ones like that. Anyway, so yes, I asked if he had Cubans, and as he turned around, I noticed that half his head was blown off.
Oh.
And he was walking around like normal, but was missing half his head. And it was all just like you could see brain matter, like as if he had been in an injury or had his head blown, maybe a suicide attempt or suicide success. I don't know. But then
when you're done, I got to say something about that dream.
Sure. Okay. I'd love to hear it because I know that you've been having them too. So this was the first one. The second one was one of my dead cats.
Oh.
And the third one was another person that I know is dead. And so then I started to realize each one of these dreams has dead people in them, or dead beings, people or animals that I knew in life, which was very interesting. And the last dream, not that I'm implying anything from this, but I think it's an association with, again, communication with the dead. Is the last dream was Zach had called me to his house to discuss something, and I usually only get Zach dreams when right before he's ready to call me on a case. So I wonder if that means I do get Zach dreams. Interestingly enough, and every single time I've had one, I've got called for a case like a month or two later. So maybe we're getting ready for another one. But again, the associate, I'm not implying that something's going to happen to Zach. I'm just saying that because he's always working with the dead, that this is again an association. Then it's like, well, okay, I understand this now because we are now entering into October and we're entering into a very early thinning of the veil. Usually it doesn't happen until the latter part of the month. And it's a particularly weak veil.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So Michael, what would you like to add to that?
Well, I'm always thinking. So one thing to add about the veil being early is up here in New England, fall is very, very beautiful event. People come and travel, and the leaves, the peepers we call them. Oh God. So I can't even get to frickin' work. I have to leave 30 minutes early, and the leaves fell very early this year, and it was because we had a heat wave. This is just something to note. I don't know if it means anything. I'm just noting that because of the weird weather patterns, the leaves have fallen early. It's supposed to be 10 days of beautiful foliage. It was only like 5, and they all just fell off.
Wow, interesting.
In a couple places down, like in New Hampshire, they're beautiful, but up by where I am, leaves are all gone.
So it looks like winter now.
Yeah, we call it stick season when before the snow, and when you see that there's a popular song that came out I don't like, but it's called Stick Season. Everyone loves it, but it's about Vermont. The guy is from Vermont, but the thing about that dream is that today, I actually told Brandon this, but I got caught up in traffic because I had passed a really awful accident, a multi-vehicle accident, and I saw them cleaning something up. So I just want to make note. I don't know what happened yet. It was today.
Yeah.
And it's like, of all the days, and then I start feeling guilty, like, of all the days to die, you chose it. It's like, am I really being that way? But I had to turn around, take a different path. And then when I got home, I was I was shaken up by what I saw. So something to note. I don't know if anyone, I don't know if anyone passed or survived, but it was very hard to see.
Yeah.
I just found that interesting that you had a dream of somebody.
And I did get the impression that it was an accident, like a car accident. It looked like, I don't know, there was just a feeling that came with it, I guess. But that was the first time in that dream that it seemed like something was off. Everything else about it was just weird. Going into this shopping plaza, it's empty, then now it's full. But I got the distinct impression after seeing that individual that all of the people in that shopping plaza that were operating those stores were dead for some reason.
That's
I
bizarre.
got a very strange impression from that after seeing him, and then the dreams that followed. And like I said, this is not typical behavior for me, but speaking of archetypal communication, I mean, dreams definitely speak the archetypal language. And I'm not saying that this is an archetypal story, but I think that the shopping plaza and, being empty and then full again is kind of an archetypal sort of story, isn't it? I don't know if it's like a experience with limbo or an experience with purgatory or something like that. Although I've had ones that definitely I thought for sure was an image of purgatory. I've had several when I was in college that I was absolutely convinced this is purgatory, and there was some consistency to it and some interesting things that came out of it that we can talk about on a show about purgatory one day. But anyway, that was...
that's why often, Michael mentioned this, about acting in films, and Hollywood and all this, because often, if I've seen a particularly, maybe not always an impactful film, but often an impactful film, you dream about it, right? Because it operates on the same archetypal level.
It does.
But I was bearing in mind, Michael, what you said about actors and method actors in particular, and there's just the first thing that sprung to mind was that the bard in Shakespeare, As You Like It, all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. So again, there's that, he was there hundreds of years ahead of lots of these people, and there were people ahead of him.
And they often had to remember vast amounts of stories in their head. They didn't have any books or anything. That's where music came into play. Yeah,
I am fortunate enough to have had a pre-digital education, and so that's why I can remember things.
Yeah.
So because there's no anything I've learned since 2005, I can't remember because I don't need to. It's in my phone somewhere, But the other one on method, because I actually think method acting is quite dangerous. And I'm not convinced it's worth the trade-off. But one of my favorite stories of method acting, it's partly because there's a kind of Hollywood versus the theatre actor in this, and there's also an American versus an Englishman in this, and it's kind of funny. Was the film Marathon Man, which starred Dustin Hoffman and Sir John Gielgud. Sir John Gielgud plays the ex-Nazi dentist that gets revealed in America, and so there's this wonderful kind of psychologically nuts exchange between them. But Dustin Hoffman was on the set one day, and he was explaining how he was exhausted because he'd stayed awake for 3 days and not eaten, and to enter into this idea of being tortured, and so he could really, and how demanding it was and how awful he felt and all the rest of it. And so John Gielgud said, "Why didn't you just try acting, dear boy?"
I like that one.
I think there's something in that. I think Sir John Gielgud, who nobody would say was an inferior actor, of course,
right.
Because I think there is if that's what you've got to do in order to play a part, then maybe you shouldn't do it.
And you brought up something. You made me think of something. As someone who's who's interacted with people in the industry, typically animation, but also I've known some people who are character actors. And funny enough, all of the people I've met, the few people I've met who are character actors, and even hearing stories of people, well-known people who play like a very specific archetype, end up being they seem like they are more well-adjusted in general. This is a general statement. People who are playing roles that are more authentic to themselves seem to be in a better place, typically.
Than being like a villain, like like the Joker there. What's his name again?
Heath Ledger.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of, I think, method acting going wrong.
Yeah, he wasn't used to being the bad guy, and then one time he plays a bad guy, it really
consumes.
Yeah, apparently he's a very nice, sweet person.
Yeah, very.
And a brilliant actor. I mean, let's face it. Yeah. I think his Joker was far superior to anyone else that's ever played it. I mean, but it's because he took it on to such a degree that couldn't shake it, And
that actually brings up something else that I'm thinking of just now, that we take on these archetypes every day without being conscious of it or aware of it.
Correct.
And if we take on an archetype that isn't compatible with us, we then have the same or similar issues to, if we, from throughout our lives, if we have attached ourselves to an archetype that isn't compatible with our authentic self, then we end up having a lot of comes out in many ways psychologically.
Well, there's a word for that. There's a word for that, Michael. It's called possession.
Well, that's
that's exactly what possession is. That's exactly what possession is.
Ideological possession is rampant at the moment. Ideological possession is absolutely destroying.
We only care about the diabolical possession
on both sides of the coin. It's.
I'm not taking sides.
It's funny because Republicans will be so loud about identity politics and how much this sucks. But it's like, but you're doing the
they're
exact
engaging
same thing.
in it
Well, it's just like the thing with I was bitching about it on the Nickelodeon Network. Everyone's like, oh, the masks are coming back. The masks are coming back. The liberals are going to bring them back.
Right,
and we're going to fight this. And it's like, but the only people I hear talking about are actually the Republicans. They're the only ones saying it. It's like, yeah, they'll bring it back if you keep pushing that out into the ether.
Yeah, shut up.
Shut the hell up. I mean, and then let's move on. They're always talking about how the liberals won't let COVID go, but it's like, you keep talking about it. You keep talking about it.
In regards to that, the best thing I've ever seen that completely describes all of it was when I went to the grocery store and I went to the chip aisle. You had two great value bags. One of them was a red wavy potato chips, and the other bag was a blue rippled potato chip bags. But they both look like the exact same thing.
Yeah. Good analogy.
It is good. Oh, Brandon, since you're on there.
We love to look, we're naturally, as a result of the fall, we're naturally tribal, right? And so, and that's all. Look, and hey, I'm not claiming innocence here. I'm not, my hands are not
I
clean.
am not free.
But I do think that. Like the problem, I think the different. Look, we all have ideologies, right? That we live our life by, or archetypes, or however you want to talk to them about them. But I think the
that was a Freudian slip right there.
Yeah,
I know. I know. Thank you. But we live our lives about that. I think where it goes really badly wrong is where we ignore the person in the ideology, either ourselves or another person. Where, in other words, where ideology becomes more important than flesh and blood people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, there's an interaction between these things, but that's where you get this people who are ridiculous, who think, they won't do anything to help somebody who's not in their tribe. Like, well, then your ideology has trumped your humanity, and there's a problem.
That's why I don't like. That's why I don't like social justice bullshit, because that's exactly what that kind of tribalism creates. Is that just like the people that are saying, if you don't get the vaccine,
on their own, on the people that they claim they will.
Yeah, they will.
As soon as you say the wrong thing.
But do you remember Do you remember what when the vaccine was? When this was in the pinnacle of, like, this was going to be what saves us, right? Everybody needs to get it. You need to be the responsible thing, and if you don't, then you need to. Then you shouldn't be allowed to get health care.
Yeah,
or you should be allowed.
Put you in a camp.
That was the kind of tribalism. It's like,
come and get me.
And now it's like, eat those words now, right? Let's eat them, because I said it. I said it back then, and I said, look, I will never let those of you who felt that way live it down. I will always remind you of how much of an asshole you were. Yep. Doesn't mean I don't love you.
Well, because
I will remind you.
Even if those facts had turned out to be true, even if those those claims had turned out to be true, that's still an unacceptable point of view.
Absolutely,
like, that's
unacceptable.
To control others.
Yeah. But
to the point of controlling
we're not or that you don't, when you're not going to get cared for if you're sick. Like, okay.
2020
so by the same logic, I can be exempt from paying taxes to the IRS then.
Yeah, right.
The events of 2020 reminded me how. Now I understand how the Germans were so easily manipulated pre-World War II.
Well, that's true.
I guess another way.
No, you're right. Yeah. There's
that woke me up. We lived it through this damn COVID thing.
Well, see, that's the thing, is that this is what archetypes do. Okay, they get into your head and then they manipulate your behavior, and they are more sentient than you are. In fact, anything that you have in yourself that is sentient is actually coming from them. You are a combination of the interactions of these things, and that's what makes it so dangerous. The difference is, though, you can control it. Get back to your authenticity, and that's what I teach my students, is how to separate from that and then control it. It's a long process. No one's going to do it perfectly, not even me, but we all aspire to that greater sense, and that's the goal. And as long as that stays the goal, then you're making progress. Brandon, what's our next question?
I didn't see a question, but kind of a point I wanted to add, since we're on the topic of archetypes and we're on the topic of Heath Ledger and the COVID vaccines and all that. But in the movie The Dark Knight, he says that we are only as good as the world allows us to be. Our morals, our code, we drop it at the first sign of trouble. So when the vaccines came out and they started saying, well, if you don't get the vaccines, you shouldn't have the right to health care, and they started the tribalisms, well, if you don't do this, then you don't get this, that was put on display for everyone to see.
That was a very powerful scene. I remember that.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. Because, of course, it doesn't have to be true. It shouldn't be true.
It shouldn't be true, but it is.
We continue to fail.
And I mean, and that's the danger, and that's the seduction of the archetypes. And so, there is a dark side to this that you can't, that mob mentality. You can't dismiss and just be, well, let's just talk about the fun metaphysical stuff like tarot decks. No, there's a deeper, you want to talk about the devil? You want to talk about the satanic? You want to talk about the diabolical? We don't need to worry about tarot cards. Okay, let's just talk about how these archetypes are already in your head, and they're controlling everything you do, and you're letting them, because they use fear and manipulation tactics.
And if you're not, if you're a weak-minded person or don't have that base of faith and knowledge in you, you're easzy pickings.
Well, that's what how religion counters it. So this is actually the mechanics of it. So, theology doesn't really talk about how it mechanically works. Okay, it just says this is the mysteries and mysticism and all this stuff. But there is actually fundamental mechanics to how it works. There's a science to religion. Okay, and it does have to do with things like psychology, behavior, the study of behavior. It has to do with how we, interact with ourselves and each other, and that mechanics has also an incorporeal spiritual, dare I say, component to this whole, the dynamic of how it works. And these archetypes, okay, when you don't understand that fundamentally everything that you have ever thought of yourself as an identity, as when people say, well, who are you? Well, this is who I am. When you look at what those concepts are that you share when somebody asks you that question, well, tell me about yourself. This is a question I get a lot because I'm being interviewed a lot. And one of the questions that people always ask, well, tell me about yourself. Or when you go on an interview for a job, tell me about yourself. And what are those things, those concepts that you share? I always had a hard time with those questions because I've spent my entire life trying to rid myself of as much identity as possible, even though I know I have some. And some of it's been built through, of course, archetypal impressions from other people, because I hate to say it, but when you take on a larger than life archetypal position like being a bishop, I mean, a bishop itself is an archetype. It's a primary archetype. In the tarot deck, it's the Hierophant. Okay, in a chess game, it's I'm a chess piece, for God's sake. I mean, that's just. I mean, it's already part of the concept, and of course, even the attire, the vestments has an archetypal impression. You see it, immediately what it is.
It's really important, actually. It's really important.
It is. But with that comes identity. So this is what creates the dissonance, where they're like, oh, he's a bishop, but wait a second. He teaches tarot, and he's writing a tarot deck, and he's got students that are learning about the occult. And this creates dissonance because they think that that's all I can be.
Yeah, you're outside your box.
Yes, yeah. And I'm stepping outside of my lane. It's like, well, no, that's not it. It's I control the archetype. The archetype doesn't control me anymore. So this is just one of the things I do for the good of the world. This is the archetype I take on for the good of other people. But it's not my identity. It's not who Bishop Bryan does not exist to me. Okay, Bishop Bryan does not exist to me. This is the archetype that exists for you. Okay, but I mean, and this is something that I think people have a really hard time doing in their own. It's not just about me with the bishop or the church. It's every one of us has a relationship to the archetypes in that exact same way. But the difference is most of you are not controlling them. And that's where the dark side comes out, because the Yetzer Hara that we've talked a lot about on the Nicolaitan Network, Brandon asked a lot of questions that comes back to that. And when we talk about evil, you can't have a discussion about evil in a theological sense without talking about Yetzer Hara. That is ultimately the predisposition. That predisposition is coming from those archetypes. Okay, because fear, jealousy, hatred, all of these things are archetypes that are already in your DNA. Okay, whether or not they become active and significant is the choice. And see, that's what I mean by controlling. You can't remove. Look, your sinful nature is what you're stuck with now. Yep. You are fallen. You're broken. You're imperfect, and there's no changing that on your own merit. And even with the grace of Christ, you still have to live through that imperfection until you are made perfect. Okay, so what you're doing now is working through that imperfection, hopefully to be made perfect. But you're not there yet. You're not there now. But the one thing that you can do is that you can indulge in the Yetzer Hara, and then woe is me. I'm just this fallen asshole. I guess I can't be better than this. This is it. Or you can say, I'm not going to let the darkness control me anymore. And see, it is absolutely accurate to say that the devil exists in this context. Okay, because that is far more real, and it is far more malevolent, and it is far more satanic, and it is far more dangerous than the mythical devil that came out of the Middle Ages and, a lot of Southern Protestants believe in, or whatever, or the evangelicals are really the big ones keeping it alive now. The more dangerous devil is that one that is inside tempting you, and it is sentient, and it is more intelligent and more capable than you are. but you have the grace to fight it. But are you going to make the choice? And see, that's it. Most people just tend to submit. When the archetypes come calling, whatever they demand, that's what we give them. And we then, at this point, just become actors on a stage.
They just submit, like the people around them submit, and then you have atrocities like what's going on overseas right now.
That's exactly what it is.
They've lost their humanity.
But also it separates people from reality, and that's what leads to. I mean, obviously, what's going on in Israel is just unimaginable. But the fact that that people get so disconnected from reality because they're so caught up in ideology that they, the sort of dyed blue hair crowd with LGBTQ flags saying, free Palestine, I think they would literally murder you if you were in Gaza. Like,
that is a fact.
I'm not saying this in a political sense, and I'm not saying this in any way to enter into the issues that those people kind of stand for. The only reason I raise that issue is the utter disconnect between reality and ideology. That in their minds these things go together, but in the real world they don't go together. In the real world, they'd throw them off a building.
Well, because there's a motivation in this country, at least, for liberals to try to build their base through minority groups, and they convince them that they're serving their interests. So it's not uncommon in this country to find Muslims who are, progressive liberals. It's very common here.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like
even though they're basically the complete opposite. They're so right wing in every aspect of their entire reality, but yet they vote liberal.
I guess if to be a bit cheeky about it, I suppose they meet round the back because they're both actually authoritarian assholes.
Oh,
basically.
absolutely, they are.
But the disconnect between reality and ideal is so evident.
Yeah.
And yet they can't see it.
No.
And these are often kids that are at university. They're supposed to have relatively high IQ, but
I don't think that means much today. I don't think.
No, because the stuff they're learning is just horseshit.
Well, that's it. I'm saying, are there any decent universities left? I mean, I don't know what it's like in Europe, but or the rest of the world, but I'm going to say that the big universities, it's pretty bad. I mean, I'm not.
Father, my hair is blue. I take offense to that.
Yeah, no, sorry. Yeah. Well, yeah.
I thought I saw you.
You get a pass, Michael.
I shouldn't put all blue-haired people.
I thought you dyed it black.
It's kind of like a dark peacock color, I guess.
Well, that's just because you like Sonic the Hedgehog. That's the reason that you do that, right?
Yeah, exactly. I also
Sonic fan.
Oh, that's the autism.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so I did want to say that that I do tell one thing that I tell my clients, and this is kind of what you were mentioning before. I tell them. Well, it depends, it depends on the person, but some of them have very, like, you read their files and you cry. I mean, I do a lot. And sure. One thing that I've said before, and that people have been very receptive to, I say, like, I've been abused. I've been emotionally abused, and you can either become the abuser or you can become the healer. And I really, truly believe that, with the grace of God and with a lot of work, inner work, and both spiritual and psychological, I really believe that that is the ultimate way to give a big middle finger to everything bad that has happened to you. And unfortunately, I see a lot of people falling into a victim mentality.
A lot of people. Yeah.
Versus a survivor. Yeah, it is easier because you don't have to. Yeah, you don't have to take
work.
Accountability.
Yeah, you just play the victim card, and exactly. I can't rise above that because I'm a victim. Well,
yeah, you can.
You don't have to face. You don't have to face the devil. You don't have to face the shadow.
In order to grow, that's exactly what you have to do. Is face your shadow self.
You just hit the nail on the head. It has to do with truly. I mean, linking archetypally the devil to a goat form makes perfect sense to me because he is the ultimate scapegoat. As long as we can blame something else for all of our wrongdoing, we feel okay about ourselves. And the devil, the biggest seduction of the devil, you'll you'll hear traditional Christians say, you know what the biggest seduction of the devil is? You want to know what it is?
Convincing everybody doesn't exist.
Yes. That's not his ultimate seduction. His ultimate seduction is making you think that he's responsible for all the things that you've done wrong.
Right.
That's the seduction of the devil. And that's what will condemn you.
A couple months ago on my Facebook page, I got into a debate with other people, other biblical scholars about the devil. And I made the comment that aren't we as Christians so lucky to have the devil? Because if we do anything, if we mess up, just blame the devil. Not yourself, and you're good.
Atheists always point that out.
I don't need to take responsibility. It's this guy over here. Yeah.
Yeah. Father, what were you going to say?
A similar kind of thing. I mean, is that actually the devil can't make you do anything.
No.
And so
he just gives you an excuse to doing what you want to do.
He can tell you I'll be fine, until you've done it, and then he says you can't be forgiven. Both are lies. And so, you don't get off that easily. And by the way, atheists do the same thing. They'll just talk about their psychology, or they'll talk about, I saw in the comments, hurt people. Yeah, but most hurt people don't hurt people.
Right.
So that's a misreading of language. That a lot of people abuse people have been abused, but most people who've been abused don't abuse people.
Right. It's a kind of a false correlation.
So in other words, although yes, okay, these things feed into why human beings do what they do, they're not excuses.
The problem I have with that, the hurt people thing, that mentality, the problem I have with it is that we've all been hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I've never killed anyone. I've never gone off the deep end, and
It's interesting. I just watched a whole video on this from a psychologist who has a YouTube channel that I really like, who made the same exact argument. And I always thought, I never knew why people used it. And I always thought, because in the context of, because I say that to myself, but I do it to exercise compassion, not to excuse the fact that they had the choice. And they didn't choose. But for me. It's the same as forgiving my abusers. It's not for them. It's for me. It's so I can move on. It's so I can let go and live my life authentically. And it's the same. It's like these people are attacking me because they're hurting. They're miserable. And that's for me. It's for me to let go. That's not to excuse anyone else. So I was always thinking that's what it meant. But I guess some people use it in different ways, varying ways.
Yeah, so we can blame the devil, or we can blame the fact that somebody hurt us, but actually we've got to own what we do.
Yes. Yep.
The devil's not that powerful. I mean, Southern Baptists are giving the devil far too much authority.
Yes.
He has no power. His whatever power, archetypally or otherwise, spiritual, however you want to break it down, whatever your worldview allows, okay? This thing that we call the devil, okay? The only any power he had, assuming he had any at all, was robbed of him at the cross. So there is no power there anymore. And so I can't personally, as a pastor, as an exorcist, as a confessor, I can't personally ever dismiss an action of an individual because the devil made me. That was what made me so upset. A few months ago, maybe even a year ago, we got a call to the church. Now you all know about the devil, the Conjuring 3.
The devil made me do it.
The devil made me do it. And Brandon had brought that up on the Nicolay Network in one of the questions a few months ago too. And so I was, we know the movie, okay? You've probably seen, if you're into the paranormal, Conjuring series is pretty good. And so the third one was about that case with the Warrens. But we had a real one. And we had a lawyer contact my office and say that there was this guy who had been molesting and sexually assaulting and raping his daughter ever since she was like like 6 or 7 years old, and had continuously done this throughout her life. And now he's been incarcerated, and I guess they're getting ready for yeah, I know, right? Getting ready for a final trial or whatever. The lawyer called us, his defense attorney called us, saying that he, was showing signs of demonic possession, and claims that this was the devil that had made him do this to his daughter, and it wanted me to come in and testify, or at least assess him, and then testify that he was truly possessed, because I think that was what they were going to use as a defense against it. And I said, I don't give a shit if the devil did tell him to do it. Bury the son of a bitch. You're not going to get me to come into a court and make that claim. That,
of course, that's what the bishop said. I was a little more professional.
Well,
to
be fair, I did not talk to the defense attorney. Jamie handled it, and when she presented it to me,
he said,
"This is what I said. This is what I said to Jamie." So she handled it with a little bit more. She held it with a little bit more class. But
that's a no.
I mean,
no with a capital S.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But that's exactly because, as a pastor, as a confessor, as an exorcist, this mentality offends me. I know I can testify. The one thing you will have me testify to is the powerlessness of the devil. The powerlessness of the devil.
He can try and manipulate you, but you make the ultimate choice.
You always make the ultimate choice.
It's free will.
St. Paul uses the Greek word dynamis a lot in the New Testament, and that is the word that we get dynamite from. It means power, and only ever in relation to the Holy Spirit, only ever in relation to God. That's where the power is. And of course, we've talked about some negative archetypes, but of course there are positive archetypes, and like the whole purpose of the true euangelion, the good news, from which we get the word evangelist, is that actually God has revealed himself in the flesh, and therefore here is an archetype by which we follow. And so, the parables that Jesus tells, we know who the heroes in the story are in the prodigal son, and the archetype of the father, the archetype of the prodigal son. And so, we're given all of these positive archetypes to follow. And of course, the ultimate one is the life of Christ, who, though he's put to death on a cross, when he returns from the dead, he opens his hands and shows his wounds to the disciples, and doesn't say what I would have said, where the fuck were you lot, and why did you leave me to die on a cross?
I mean, right?
He says, peace be with you.
Yeah.
And so that's the archetype that just destroys any notion of giving into to the demons, giving into our lesser selves.
Well, do you remember when we were talking about the mechanics of spirituality? Like, theology has this, the mysteries and the mystical and the spiritual aspects that it describes things through that kind of spiritual, mystical language, but there's an actual practical mechanics to it. And to the point of what you're saying, when we go and receive baptism, we are baptized, even in the very words of Scripture, we're baptized into his death and rising, right? When we receive the Eucharist, we take on his very essence through consumption of his very body and blood, that it becomes part of us. We carry him in much the same way that the Virgin Mary carries him in the womb. It becomes like he's inside us. He lives. This is literally, physically taking in the most positive archetype you could possibly take in, and it changes you slowly, as all archetypes work. Some are a little bit faster than others, but I find that because of entropy, the negative archetypes are faster acting. And the positive ones,
they're acting on denaturing you.
Yes.
Whereas taking on Christ is actually to be restored to your true nature.
Right.
It's funny. I just randomly pulled a card with my method, and I pulled.
What'd you get?
Art.
Art. Art. Yeah.
This is exactly what we're talking about.
It is what we're talking
very
about.
Funny.
Yeah, it's true. But that's art, literally the mechanics of this. This is what it is. So the sacraments, we talk about grace, and we talk about these things in ethereal spiritual language, to the point that in our materialist society, we look at this and be like, you can't even make a connection some people can't even make a connection to these things because they're so ethereal that they almost feel like fairy tales. They're almost spoken to in a fairy tale like language today, which does not relate to very materialist secular people. But I try to connect people to let's get practical about it then. What exactly is happening at a psychological level? Let's just, if you can't make the leap into the spiritual, into faith, fine. Let's just talk about what's practically happening then. What is the mechanics and the material of what's happening here? You are taking an archetype and replacing it with the darkness of one that pre-existed it. When we do exorcism, that's exactly what we're doing. We're removing a dark archetype and replacing it with the positive one of Christ. And through cultivation, it gets stronger. The positive archetype gets stronger, and the negative one gets dissipated. That's how it works. And we do this all the time in every aspect, in every facet. Just religion is the clearest way to see it working.
That's why it's not magic.
That's right. It's exactly why it's not magic. That's right. Yeah, that's right. No.
So all the claims of the materialist types that say, you think you got some kind of magical power over spiritual entities, like no, not at all. It's way more practical than that. It's way more normal than that.
It's so normal.
It's actually more boring than that, but actually that's what you got to do.
It's exactly what it is. It's so boring, and if you really break it down, it's like it makes so much perfect sense. And that, even an atheist could get it if they spent the time. And I've actually gone onto forums. I've gone onto atheist forums and had conversations like this. And they don't know what to do with me. They don't know what to do. And they'll try some of
because they've got straw man. They've got a straw man. That's why.
And that's what it is. You're right.
They're deciding what Christianity is. They're deciding what these categories mean. And of course, their definitions are not our definitions.
No.
And so it's a straw man. And
they only know what they think they know. They only know what they've been taught to know. They have never actually made the leap into it.
And they're going based off people who don't even know what they're practicing.
Yes.
So
exactly.
It's like
and
if you put them in the middle of the West Bank today, they'd realize how Christian they were.
Or how grateful they were that they live in a culture that evolved out of the Christian worldview. It's true. Well, my goodness, Michael, I just want to thank you so much for being on the show again. We got to do this every season.
I know it's always fun.
It's good to see you.
Always have a good time with you, and it's always like I said, you have a true open invitation. Brandon is our coordinator now, so Brandon, I would love for you to when you're starting to get season 9 up and running. I know you're already talking and thinking about it. We're probably going to start season 9 around the day before Ash Wednesday, so that would be like the day before Valentine's Day, I think, this year, which is February 13th. That's probably when the next season will start up. So, and then it'll run all the way to June. So probably 15 episodes. And that's going to be an opportunity for you to come back, Michael. So stay in touch with Brandon and us, and we'll come up with a new topic to discuss. Okay.
All right. Sounds great.
Great.
Thank you.
Take care, hon.
Thank you, Father Chris. Brandon, thank you for being with us tonight. Jamie, thank you. We will continue this discussion of archetypes and the tarot next week in a completely different way with a completely different guest, a brand new guest, James Ferreira, good friend of ours. We worked on The Conjuring 3 together. He was the he did some of the press work and was the publisher for that production. And he's a great guy, fantastic guy. And I got him into the tarot, believe it or not. And it has revolutionized his life. He's going to come back. He's going to come here to talk about it. And hopefully he might become a reoccurring guest because we just love him that much. And you'll love him too. So that's next week, Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. But until then, I'll see you out there in the ether. God bless everyone.
Good night, everybody.